Chapter 144. Another test, an unexpected invitation. Luo Fan originally knew that this chaotic spiritual route was extraordinary, so he pointed Guang Pu to come here so that she could refine it and obtain great benefit. However, now that he saw this chaotic spiritual route again, he realized that he seemed to have underestimated it before. In the past, when he was still a Pishio, he had seen this chaotic spiritual route. However, even though there was a natural formation in the valley, it was very simple and crude. Even a muddle-headed being like him couldn't stop it. All he could do was gather a large amount of chaos energy to nourish this poplar-shaped chaos spiritual root in the valley. The reason why he left was that he instinctively found that he could not compete with the chaotic spiritual root here at all. The chaotic spiritual chi that he could absorb was very little. At that time, although the poplar was a little mysterious, its momentum could not reach this level at all. It seemed that it was only slightly better than the Pishio. However, he didn't expect that after a period of development and with the help of the surrounding natural formations, this chaotic spiritual root would actually grow to such a profound state. Only then did he realize that this chaotic spiritual root's innate aptitude had already reached an inconceivable level. He could not help but feel pity for this chaotic spiritual root's spiritual consciousness dissipated early for unknown reasons. No matter what kind of chaotic spiritual root it was, its predecessor was an innate god. However, when these innate gods were born, due to some unknown defect, their spiritual consciousness could not really condense in the end. Therefore, they could not become real innate gods and became chaotic spiritual root. Although this natural formation was mysterious and unpredictable, contained countless mysteries, and was even more difficult to break through. However, Luo Fan knew that if Guang Pu were to study it diligently, he would only need to spend a few years to study it thoroughly. At that time, not only would she be able to break through this formation and enter the valley, she would also be able to obtain immeasurable benefits in the process. One should know that this natural formation appeared together with this chaotic spiritual root. It had unimaginable benefits for the growth of the chaotic spiritual root. Naturally, it also had endless benefits for the plant origin innate god. If Guang Pu could comprehend the secret of this natural formation and use it on herself, the benefits to her growth would be beyond imagination. If you can break through this formation, then my guidance won't be in vain, Luo Fan said to himself. With that thought in mind, he raised his hand and pointed. A mysterious light rushed out from his hand and crazily absorbed the chaotic energy in the surroundings. It condensed, compressed, and grew bigger. In the end, it turned into a spirit talisman that was constantly changing. It rushed into the chaotic spiritual root and disappeared into the chaotic spiritual root. This bit of light contained a bit of will and a bit of memory. If Guang Pu absorbed this poplar-shaped chaos spiritual root into her body, this tiny bit of consciousness would burst out, and in the form of comprehension, it would let Guang Pu feel that she was in the moon. Among them, another bit of memory contained the method and route to the moon from here. It was enough for anyone who could break through the gang wind, thunder, and fire layer to reach the moon easily. With this chaotic spiritual root, breaking through the gang wind, thunder, and fire layer won't be a problem. With the guidance of memory, finding the path in the endless starry sky and reaching the moon won't be a problem. It all depends on whether you can break through the shackles of familial love. Luo Fan thought to himself and set up another comprehension of Guang Pu's consciousness. Breaking through the shackles of familial love didn't mean cutting off these two kinds of emotions. Instead, it was to break through the shackles of these two kinds of emotions. She had to see her heart clearly and see what was her real desire. Originally, after Guang Pu passed the 12 tests, Luo Fan was already very satisfied with Guang Pu's pursuit of Tao. He thought that Guang Pu's pursuit of Tao was very firm. Even if it wasn't as firm as Hongjuan's, it was enough to bear the burden of eternal life. However, He didn't expect that after Guang Pu and Luo Fu had feelings for each other, there would be such a huge change in her heart. Her pursuit of Tao was no longer as firm as before. Instead, it seemed to be satisfied with the relationship between a man and a woman. This made him doubt Guang Pu's determination, and he was even a little disappointed. Therefore, he took this opportunity to set up such a test. If Guang Pu couldn't pass his test, and couldn't break the shackles of familial love, then Luo Fan would probably have to change his attitude towards Guang Pu in the future. Just when Luo Fan had just set up a hidden test, Jifeng Boy suddenly didn't hear Luo Fan's call. He directly turned into a silver light and followed the connection between him and Luo Fan, penetrating the natural formation. As he fell and condensed, he condensed in front of Luo Fan. After forming, he bowed down and said, "Master, there is a rune here. It was sent by an innate god more than 10 years ago. He wanted me to pass it to you." Luo Fan was slightly surprised and said, "What rune is it? Let me see." Hearing this, Jifeng Boy patted the void in front of him with his right hand, and a blue strange existence was patted out from his hand. It was constantly changing in the void, floating up and down. Luo Fan used the great sun golden pupil and bright moon silver pupil to see through this strange existence. He knew that it was a very strange rune. Its structure was very subtle and profound, and its power essence was also quite extraordinary. It was condensed by the innate water essence with chaotic characteristics. After this green rune left Jifeng Boy's body, it flashed a few times and suddenly exploded. It then transformed into a blue cloud of connate water essence, and after tumbling for a while, it suddenly condensed into a strange old face that filled the surrounding area. Fellow Taoist, since you can refine such a strange thing, you must have made some achievements on the Tao path. I am not talented, but I believe I have some understanding on the Tao path. I would like to meet with you to discuss Tao and pursue the Tao together. I hope you won't give up. The voice of this strange old face was also quite old. It seemed to be full of vicissitudes of life. Its tone was gentle and contained great majesty, which made people who heard it feel enlightened. After the strange face finished speaking, it suddenly scattered and condensed again, turning into a scroll with a circumference of 10 feet. On it were thousands of mysterious and complicated characters created by Pengu and dozens of complicated patterns. It recorded a mysterious position in the center of a river somewhere in the untainted land. As soon as Luo Fan saw this scroll, he recognized the position recorded on the scroll. It was the position of one of the 18 innate gods in his memory. Since the appearance of this strange old face, Luo Fan's great sun golden pupil and bright moon silver pupil kept flashing, and instantly saw the nature of this strange face. In fact, this strange face was formed by absorbing and condensing the innate water essence with a little thought. It did not have any attack power, but it could leave behind images and sounds. Although this method was not very profound, it was not something an ordinary innate god could do. It required a pure and condensed thought to be able to do it. Among them, Luo Fan could even see another kind of cultivation method. Its mysteriousness and profoundness seemed to be not inferior to Fun Tian's primordial spirit. Luo Fan could find the 18 innate gods that Guang Pu and Luo Fu might have encountered along the way from Buzhou Mountain to this place, in the memories of the Pai Xiu. In these memories, these innate gods were at most as muddle-headed as the Pai Xiu. There were even many who only had instincts, and did not even have the ability to think. For innate gods in their state, it was already a great opportunity for them to be able to develop to the level of Guang Pu in a period of time. It was also based on this understanding that Luo Fan had set up such a route to let Guang Pu and Luo Fu come to collect the chaotic spiritual root. However, he did not expect that apart from the innate god in the valley decades ago, there was actually another innate god whose growth was far beyond his expectations. This made him feel a little strange, but at the same time, he was very interested. I did not expect that there would be another innate God who could grow beyond my expectations. I think he must have had a fortuitous encounter, and I should meet him. Maybe I can benefit from it." With this thought in mind, he raised his hand and the scroll that was condensed by the innate water essence fell into his hand. Through the great sun golden eyes and the bright moon silver eyes, he had long discovered that this scroll was not simple. In addition to showing the location, it also had a kind of identity verification function, which was equivalent to an invitation. Raising his hand and putting the scroll into the sleeve universe, Luo Fan said to Jifeng Boy, "You continue to stay and protect Luo Fu and his family. Don't let them die." "Yes, sir." Jifeng Boy had no self-consciousness, so he did not object, but directly bowed and agreed. Then, he suddenly turned around and turned into a silver light again. He rushed out of the natural battle array along the way he came, and hid in the void not far from Luo Fu and his family. He was like a seal that suppressed the void, stable as a weld. He was also like a god with an extremely strong protection, majestic and awe-inspiring. Seeing this, Luo Fan smiled slightly. He turned into a long rainbow and rushed out, passing through the natural battle array in the blink of an eye. Then, he turned again and rushed straight to the big river, which was where the innate god was. The location of the big river was about 60 million miles away from here. It was a river that was more than 600 miles wide, thousands of miles deep, and nearly 9 million miles long. The location marked on the scroll was at the bottom of the river, somewhere in the middle of the river. Luo Fan turned into a long rainbow and flew at an extremely fast speed. Not long after, he stopped and landed on the peak of a small mountain next to the river. In front of them was a river that stretched as far as the eye could see. The water was both calm and turbulent, and there was a certain kind of balance in the contradiction. The sound of the water was like 10,000 horses galloping, and the waves reflected the sunlight. The scene was magnificent, and it made one's mind open up. Standing next to the surging river, Luo Fan carefully felt the mysteries of the river. After a while, he said indifferently, "Luo Fan came here by invitation, and I hope you can come out and meet me." His voice was clear, and it spread far and wide. It could be clearly heard within a radius of nearly 10,000 miles. No matter how far it was like a soft call in the ear. Chapter 145. You water into magic, changing time. After a while, a whirlpool gradually appeared in the river in front of him. At first, the whirlpool was small, almost undetectable. But as time went by, the whirlpool quickly grew larger and larger. After a while, the entire river, which was as wide as the ocean, was completely filled up by the whirlpool. The waves stirred up by the whirlpool surged violently, slapping against the reefs and riverbanks around. The noise produced was earth-shattering, as if the whole world was shaking along with it. An unimaginable power gushed out of the whirlpool. The strong pressure of nature pressed straight down on Luo Fan. Although it could not suppress his strength, it was enough to make him slightly move. As the whirlpool filled up the entire river, a very strange change gradually appeared there. The whirlpool suddenly rose slowly and floated in the air, as if a few giant hands were rubbing the whirlpool, making it rise as if it was a real thing. Soon, a huge spiral column of water rose above the river, reaching the same height as where Luo Fan was standing. At this moment, the whirlpool stabilized. Although the column of water did not fall, it did not rise either. Instead, it formed a strange balance. Luo Fan looked at this scene and knew that Yusu was coming out to meet with him. He could also see that Yusu had a strong control over the river. He could also sense the extremely profound cultivation of the being who controlled the river. Fellow Taoist, it is Yusu's greatest honor to come from afar. At this moment, an old voice came rolling out of the whirlpool. This voice was different from Luo Fan's distant voice. Instead, it was like thunder from the ninth heaven. Although it looked completely different from Luo Fan's, it had a different aura to it. In terms of the momentum of its appearance, It was not inferior to Luo Fan's at all. Then, an old man suddenly appeared above the spiral column of water. The old man was about the height of an ordinary person. He had a rough shape of a human, but his appearance was rather strange. Both his face and body shape were very different from born Taoist aptitude. There were only 2 small holes in his nose, no eyebrows, and his mouth was straight like a big clam. His body was covered with scales, and on his back was a plate in the shape of the 8 trigrams. Even so, he did not look ugly at all. Instead, he seemed to have a very strange charm. He seemed to be in harmony with the world and nature, which made people involuntarily think of him as a kind elder. At first glance, Luo Fan knew that this Yusu was a tortoise-shaped innate god. He smiled and said, "Since fellow Taoist has invited me, how can I not come?" At this moment, the spiral water column turned, and like a water dragon in mid-air, it twisted a few times before fiercely rushing towards Luo Fan. Its momentum was like a water dragon pouncing on its prey. Luo Fan stood there with a smile on his face, not taking it seriously at all. His eyes were the golden eyes of the sun and the silver eyes of the bright moon, which allowed him to see through the spiral column of water the moment it appeared. He knew that the column of water was not meant to attack him, but to send Yusu to this place. When the column of water reached him, it would definitely stop. Therefore, Ji Hao did not need to stay calm, nor did he put up any defense. Seeing Fu Xiang's reaction, Yusu showed a faint smile on his strange old face. Obviously, he was very satisfied with Luo Fan's judgment and calmness. Sure enough, this spiral water column suddenly stagnated in front of Luo Fan. Then, it dispersed with a loud bang, turning back into river water and falling into the river. It was as if it was restricted by a huge force, but not a single drop splashed onto the mountain peak. Yusu, however, landed lightly in front of Luo Fan. "Fellow Taoist, you must have completely refined this river, right?" Luo Fan said with a smile. "It's just an external object. Although it can protect me, it can't improve my cultivation." Yusu's face was full of smiles, and his old face looked like a blooming flower. Luo Fan was indeed amazed. Through his eyes, he could see that this river, which was more than 600 miles wide and millions of miles long, had a subtle but close connection with Yusu. It seemed to be changing and adjusting with every breath he took. Obviously, this was the result of Yusu having refined the entire river into a strange magical item. To be able to refine such a huge river, Yusu's cultivation must at least be equal to that of an earth immortal. This was not because the quality of the river was strange, but because the volume of the river was too enormous. The amount of water contained in a river that was millions of miles long, over 600 miles wide, and almost 500 kilometers deep could probably only be described with astronomical figures. It has been tens of thousands of years since I attained the Tao, and I'm delighted to finally meet a fellow Taoist. I'm Yusu, and I cultivate in Yu River. Yusu bowed seriously. I'm Luo Fan, and I cultivate in Buzhou Mountain. Luo Fan knew that the cultivation of this innate god before him was equal to an earth immortal. Even though he didn't know what cultivation technique Yusu cultivated, he didn't dare be disrespectful and hurriedly returned the greeting. "Is it the northwest heavenly pillar, Buzhou Mountain?" Yusu seemed to know of the existence of Buzhou Mountain, and he was slightly surprised and asked to confirm. Even though Luo Fan was slightly surprised, he nodded and answered, "Yes, it's the northwest heavenly pillar." So fellow Taoist actually has such an enormous background. No wonder you're able to refine such a profound artifact. Yusu exclaimed with admiration. The profound artifact he was referring to was naturally the Dharma Treasure Square Seal. "Fellow Taoist, you flatter me. Being able to refine this Yu River, your ability is admirable." Luo Fan naturally would not be impolite. After all, it was the beginning of the primeval world, and the ways of the world were not very prosperous. Therefore, after they talked for a while, Yusu said to Luo Fan, I have a cave abode in Yu River. I wonder if fellow Taoist would do me the honor to have a look. He invited Luo Fan to his cave abode for an exchange. I couldn't ask for more. Luo Fan smiled slightly. Even though this Yu River had been refined by Yu Su, it was only a Dharma treasure after all. Even if Luo Fan, who had the Void Wuji Palace to protect himself, stepped into it, he would definitely be able to protect himself. Naturally, there was no need for him to hesitate. Hearing Luo Fan's words, Yu Su seemed to be overjoyed by Luo Fan's trust in him. He raised his hand, and a waterway rushed up from the river like a staircase, extending straight to the mountain peak where Luo Fan and Yu Su were. Fellow Taoist, please. Yu Su raised his hand and gestured. Luo Fan nodded and led the way, setting foot on the waterway. As they stepped onto the waterway flowed automatically. In just a short while, it brought them into the river. Yu Su was an innate god who was born in the Yu water, and the Yu water was completely refined by him. Therefore, he wouldn't feel any discomfort when he was immersed in it. Needless to say, Luo Fan, after attaining the fruit of earthly immortal, was almost omnipotent. Naturally, he would not feel uncomfortable at all. As soon as he entered the river, Luo Fan felt that the surrounding innate water essence had become incomparably rich. As he breathed, he seemed to be able to feel the endless innate water essence constantly flowing into his body through his pores, through his meridians, and directly into his body. The density of this energy is no less than that of a mid-level chaotic energy source. Luo Fan praised inwardly as he sensed the energy that was refined from the connate water essence that surged into his body. Looking at Yu Su, who was looking at him with a smile, he knew that Yu Su had deliberately changed the distribution of energy in Yu River, which was why he had such a feeling as soon as he entered the river. Not every part of Yu River had such a density of energy. Knowing that Yu Su was showing off his magic, he nodded and smiled, then quietly enjoyed the surge of energy. After a while, the two landed at the bottom of the river. Seeing the scene at the bottom of the river, Luo Fan could not help but praise, "Fellow Taoist, you are so ingenious that you can set up such a gorgeous and exquisite cave abode. It is truly admirable." Below them, there was a group of palaces that were as translucent as crystal palaces. Light produced by all kinds of magic shone on these crystal palaces, illuminating countless unimaginable things, such as 10,000-year-old corals, crystal dragons, beautiful jade floors, spiritual roots, and aquatic plants. All of this made the crystal palace seem like a paradise in the mortal world, and it possessed the ability to amaze anyone. Moreover, the connate water essence contained within seemed to have a physical form, winding around the palaces like strange streams, making the palaces look even more mysterious and unfathomable. Even Luo Fan could not help but be amazed when he saw such a gorgeous scene with his own eyes. As the golden eyes of the great sun and the silver eyes of the bright moon flashed, he had already clearly seen through the mysteries of the purple-yellow palaces and understood something. This group of palaces seemed to be at the bottom of the river, but in fact it was in another space. It was just that it was combined with Yu River in a very mysterious way, so it looked like it was at the bottom of the river. The space where the crystal palaces were located was a small space created by Yu Su. Although it was not a small kiliacosm could only change time. However, this ability to change time was far inferior to that of Luo Fan's small kiliacosm, which could turn a day into a year. This cave abode seemed to only be able to speed up the flow of time by one time. No wonder his growth is far beyond my imagination. Luo Fan finally understood how this connate god Yu Su could grow to this level. While he was thinking about this, the waterway had already brought the two of them through a very strange invisible barrier and into the crystal palaces, which was the cave abode. Instantly, there was no longer a drop of water around them. At the same time, there was an energy that was a mixture of chaotic yuan qi and connate water essence. This cave abode was tens of thousands of miles in circumference, and inside it was the appearance of the crystal palaces. It was even larger and more spectacular than what they had seen outside the cave abode. This Immortal's Cave is the first magic art that I have comprehended. Although it is simple and crude, it is quite mysterious. I wonder if you have seen through it? Yusu said to Luo Fan with a smile. I can only see that this cave abode has the ability to change time. Other than that, I can't see anything else. Luo Fan said with a smile. Chapter 146. The Great Path of Runes. However, although Yusu was smiling bitterly, there was not the slightest hint of depression in his eyes. Instead, he seemed to be rather excited. It was precisely this excitement that made his originally old voice seem to no longer be that old. When Luo Fan heard Yusu praising him with a bitter smile, he naturally did not dare to accept it. He hurriedly said that he was just lucky to be able to see through it. Yusu knew what the truth was, so he did not continue to argue. He only raised his right hand and waved it lightly. In an instant, a profound and unfathomable trajectory appeared. Following that, an extremely mysterious vibration was produced in every inch of the cave. In an instant, Luo Fan felt as if he was in a small world flowing through his mind, as if some indescribable characteristic of the cave had undergone a very subtle change. The power of Luo Fan's great sun golden pupil and bright moon silver pupil was astonishing, but in an instant, he was able to see through this extremely subtle change. In the blink of an eye, he already knew the source of this wonderful change. The source of the change was under a throne in the middle of the palace. Within it, there were hundreds of thousands of profound and unfathomable runes interweaving together, forming a combination that contained endless mysteries. In a way that was beyond Luo Fan's expectations, it changed the flow of time inside the cave. In an instant, he memorized these hundreds of thousands of runes in his mind. Luo Fan suddenly felt that his gains from coming here had completely made up for his hard work. Even if he could no longer receive enlightenment from Yusu, he would no longer feel disappointed. Although there are some flaws in the combination of these runes, since they can obtain such a mysterious effect of changing time, if the flaws are made up for and combined with the chaotic space technique, wouldn't it be able to allow this technique to also obtain the effect of changing time? At that time, this chaotic space technique might even be able to be raised to the level of opening up a formation space and achieving the supreme realm of true primal chaos space. Luo Fan thought to himself, and couldn't help but feel a little excited. If this chaotic space technique could be transformed into a supreme realm that could change time and form a formation space, then it would be almost a holy realm of cultivation. This didn't mean much to him, but for his disciples like Hong Jun, the speed of cultivation would be countless times faster. Just when Luo Fan was slightly excited, Yusu had already brought Luo Fan to the largest crystal palace. Luo Fan didn't come back to his senses until he touched the tough ground below. He smiled slightly and said, "Sorry, I saw your ability just now. I was enlightened, but I lost my composure." "I see. Fellow is so diligent. You are really a role model for my generation. However, I wonder if it's possible for me to witness the technique you've comprehended?" Yusu's eyes lit up. Although such a direct request was somewhat impolite, he had invited Luo Fan here in order to see more wondrous techniques that he had never seen before and to absorb the insights of others to increase his own cultivation realm. At this moment, even if this request was a little rude, he couldn't care less. Luo Fan faintly smiled. He wasn't offended by such a straightforward request. On the contrary, he felt that it was more carefree. He had come here to exchange his understanding of the great Tao, not to make friends. Thus, he nodded and said, "Why not?" So, in the blink of an eye, it turned into an extremely complicated three-dimensional talisman around him and Yusu. Like a silk cocoon, it wrapped the space around them. In the blink of an eye, it turned into an extremely complicated three-dimensional talisman around him and Yusu. Like a silk cocoon, it wrapped the space around them. At the same time, an extremely strong suction was produced in the spherical three-dimensional talisman. Almost endless natural water essence in the cave kept rushing towards the spherical three-dimensional talisman, like rivers flowing into the sea, directly into the three-dimensional talisman. Through some complicated and mysterious changes, it was transformed into wisps of chaotic chi, filling the space within a radius of 10,000 feet. Then, Luo Fan raised his hand again and gently waved it. Hundreds of thousands of talisman characters that Yusu was very familiar with, but also a little strange, flashed on the three-dimensional talisman. After a long time, they gradually merged with the three-dimensional talisman. As they merged, the space within a radius of 10,000 feet instantly changed. The density of chaotic chi increased sharply, and there was a very inexplicable feeling in Yusu's heart. Feeling this inexplicable feeling, Yusu already knew that the time inside the three-dimensional talisman was 3 times faster than the outside world. In other words, the time inside the talisman was 6 times faster than the outside world. Sensing the change of time, Yusu realized that the hundreds of thousands of spell characters that emerged on the three-dimensional talisman at the end were the core spell characters of the cave he created, and had been optimized to make the effect of the spell characters stronger, and the structure of the spell characters more reasonable. At this moment, Yusu realized that within such a short while Luo Fan had mastered all the hundreds of thousands of spell characters that he created with tens of thousands of years of tireless efforts, and had even reached a higher level. Sensing this, Yusu's expression changed dramatically. A while later, he decisively kneeled to Luo Fan and said excitedly, "Master, I didn't know that you were so powerful. I dare not to discuss the Tao with you anymore. I am willing to take you as my Shifu, and I am begging you to take me as your disciple." He dared not to be careless anymore, and even changed the way he addressed Luo Fan. The situation changed so fast that it was beyond Luo Fan's expectation. "How can I accept this? You and I can still call each other fellow Taoists. You are flattering me." Hurriedly, Luo Fan helped Yusu up and said, "Master, don't be modest. Master, you are more than 10,000 times more powerful than me. Being able to take you as my Shifu is already a great honor for me. How can I dare to call you fellow Taoist? I hope you won't reject me," said Yusu firmly. With the golden eyes of the great sun and the silver eyes of the bright moon, Luo Fan could instantly tell whether someone meant what he said or not. Through this special ability, he knew that Yusu's words were absolutely from the bottom of his heart. This caused him to be placed in a difficult position. Taking Yusu as a disciple was very awkward for both Yusu and himself, but he didn't want to make this choice. However, if he didn't take Yusu as a disciple, looking at Yusu's sincere and determined face, he didn't know how long Yusu would pester him. "Forget it, get up first. I don't dare to take you as my disciple. But if you have any questions, I will tell you everything I know, and I won't hide anything from you." Luo Fan helped Yusu up and said. Hearing this, Yusu still didn't want to. He begged for a while, but Luo Fan didn't allow it. A strange old man knelt down and begged a young man. This scene was quite strange, but neither of them felt it was the slightest bit awkward. After a while, Yusu realized that Luo Fan was determined and couldn't change his mind, so he reluctantly agreed. However, he no longer dared to address Luo Fan as a fellow Taoist. In fact, he didn't even dare to address him as a fellow Taoist. He only addressed Luo Fan as supreme. Luo Fan said it a few times, but it didn't work. He had no choice but to accept it. After Luo Fan accepted the title, Yusu finally relaxed. He raised his hand and gestured for Luo Fan to sit on the throne in the hall, while he sat on the side. Since he had changed the way he addressed Luo Fan knew that he couldn't refuse, so he sat on the throne with a bitter smile. As soon as he sat on the throne, his expression changed slightly. because he already felt that the connection between his mind and the entire cave had become many times stronger as soon as he sat on the throne, as if he had merged with the cave and become a part of it. This throne was actually the control hub of the cave. Master, may I ask how to improve the combination of time spell symbols so that they can speed up time? Seeing Luo Fan sit down, Yusu couldn't wait to ask. The core combination of spell symbols of the cave had a name in Yusu's mind, which was called Time Spell Symbol Combination, which was quite suitable for the cave. Luo Fan sensed the feeling that he had almost merged with the entire cave, then said, "This combination is quite magical, but it still has some flaws. It can be improved with a little optimization, but it doesn't need many special changes." As he spoke, he raised his hand and pointed his finger. Following his move, hundreds of thousands of complicated and mysterious spell symbols appeared in front of him. He raised his hand again, and more than 3,600 spell symbols lit up. Then, with a slight change of his mind, he made slight changes to them, such as increasing, decreasing, moving, twisting. Along with these changes, the combination of time spell symbols changed dramatically. Originally, it was complicated and a little bloated, but now it was extremely simple and natural, and a very strange aura was constantly emitting from it. It was as if the great Tao of heaven and earth was contained in it. It can actually change like this. Yusu looked at the spell symbols in fascination, his hands almost uncontrollably moving slightly, as if he was sketching the spell symbols. Obviously, he had gained a great understanding from it. Looking at Yusu's expression and movements, Luo Fan knew that he was completely immersed in it. He couldn't help but smile and shake his head. He didn't disturb Yusu, but just sat there quietly, feeling the feeling of his mind and the cave together, and secretly analyzing the mysteries. After half a day, Yusu woke up from the intoxicated state of comprehension. Seeing that Luo Fan was waiting for him, he couldn't help but look a little embarrassed. But Luo Fan didn't care. Seeing that Yusu had woken up, he just smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist, your cultivation method is quite mysterious. I wonder if you can let me take a look." How could Yusu not understand that Luo Fan had discovered some flaws in his cultivation method and wanted to give him some pointers? Hurriedly gathering his thoughts, he bowed and said, "I hope that you can give me some pointers." As he spoke, he raised his hand and clapped. The void in front of him changed out of thin air, and hundreds of complicated and abstruse characters and hundreds of thousands of runes instantly appeared there. At the same time, he pointed at his own head, and a very strange existence instantly rushed out from the top of his head. It was a lump the size of a human head, floating 3 feet above his head, constantly changing its shape. The azure light was like an endless ocean, but also like an incomparably vast and deep sky. Luo Fan glanced at it and instantly absorbed the hundreds of characters and the hundreds of thousands of runes into his mind. Combined with the azure existence floating above Yusu's head, he already knew the secret of Yusu's cultivation. So it's the Tao of runes. I didn't expect that such a wonderful method actually exists. Luo Fan secretly praised. Floating above Yusu's head, emitting a boundless blue light, was an incomparably complicated and abstruse spell symbol that was composed of nearly 1,000,000 spell symbols. Its energy was the combination of Yusu's divine soul and endless innate water essence. Chapter 147. Simplified Rune Deity, Source of Rune Tao 1. This blue, head-sized rune combination was made up of nearly 1,000,000 complicated and abstruse runes. They were combined in a very mysterious way to form an organic whole that contained infinite power. Because this combination of talismans was formed from Yusu's soul and boundless natural water essence, it allowed Yusu to possess boundless might and raise his cultivation to an unimaginable level. It allowed Yusu to be comparable to Luo Fan, who just attained the earthly immortal realm all those years ago. However, this was the limit of this rune combination. This rune combination was the core of Yu Su's life. It contained all of his memories and marks of life. It could be called a rune deity. This talisman god contained endless mysteries and could improve Yu Su's cultivation by countless folds, even granting him immortality, the ability to move mountains and drain oceans, and the ability to fly in the sky and dive into the ground. However, its structure had a fatal weakness. This weakness was the complexity and redundancy. Just like the computer programs on Earth in the future, although this rune deity had all kinds of unimaginable power and magical powers, the way it achieved these powers and magical powers was not the best way. Along the way there were countless detours. Almost every rune inside the rune deity was repeated more than a dozen times. One could imagine the complexity and redundancy of the rune deity. From this point alone, it could be seen that this rune deity could be optimized and simplified many times. Because of this structural weakness, if Yu Su were to use this talisman god as the core, his current cultivation state would already be the limit. The improvement of the rune Dao was to add runes to the rune deity. With this kind of structure, if the rune deity was added to the rune deity, no matter what it was, even the simplest and most concise rune, the rune deity would collapse instantly. The collapse of the rune deity would cause Yu Su's cultivation level to dissipate instantly. Even if he was lucky enough to survive, his cultivation level would be completely destroyed. This method is quite mysterious. Unfortunately, your accumulation is slightly lacking. This rune deity is too complicated. There are many areas that can be simplified. Luo Fan smiled. I also know that the structure of this symbol deity is still not perfect. It's just that I've cultivated this talisman god for nearly a yuan hui, but I've never been able to find a way to simplify it. No matter what kind of structure I try to change it into, in the end, it's still extremely cumbersome. This is the limit of what I can do, Yu Su said helplessly. Hearing this, Luo Fan realized that the time Yu Su mentioned was the time in the cave, not the time in the outside world. In terms of the time in the outside world, 1 yuan hui was equivalent to more than 60,000 years. Although it was long, it was not unbearable. However, I can modify the structure of this symbol divinity for you. According to my estimations, this symbol divinity can be simplified by at least 10 times. However, if you were to do so, it would be disadvantageous to your future cultivation because you did not comprehend it yourself. Luo Fan nodded and said. Hearing Luo Fan, Yu Hu showed both surprise and struggle on his face. After a long while, he clenched his teeth and said, My lord, please change Yu Su's name. I, Yu Hu, will never forget your great kindness. Luo Fan sighed inwardly. He knew that the stagnant progress of these years had become a demon in Yu Su's heart, a torment for him. Even if he taught him the method and let him modify and comprehend it on his own, it would probably take him a long time to succeed, which might have a greater impact on his future cultivation. Therefore, he would not look down on Yu Su because of his choice. Instead, he smiled faintly and said, This is just a small matter. Why do I need to thank you? As he spoke, he raised his hand and pointed his finger at the cultivation technique that was displayed in the void, which was composed of hundreds of characters and hundreds of thousands of complicated and abstruse runes. In an instant, a drastic change occurred. The hundreds of characters suddenly increased by 100 times, from the original hundreds of characters to tens of thousands of characters. In the blink of an eye, the hundreds of thousands of complicated and abstruse runes gathered together, colliding, collapsing, and recombining in some mysterious way. After a while, it unfolded again and turned into countless runes that filled the sky, mixing with those characters. However, after the recombination, the number of runes had been reduced from hundreds of thousands to 129,600, which was exactly the number of 1 yuan hui. It had been reduced by a few times. These 129,600 runes and the tens of thousands of characters wove together in a mysterious way, making the cultivation technique seem as if it had suddenly come to life, producing an astonishing vigor. There was even a bit of a mysterious aura being emitted from it, as if these runes and words, which did not contain any power, contained a mysterious power, causing the surrounding innate water essence to undergo an inexplicable change. It seemed that the closer they got to these runes, the more active they became. The foundation of Yusu's cultivation was spell symbols, and even his own cultivation technique was based on spell symbols. Therefore, his study and understanding of spell symbols were so profound that almost no one in the world could compare with him. At this moment, when he saw the cultivation technique modified by Luo Fan, he was instantly stunned. The expression on his face gradually changed from the original perplexity to the sudden realization, from the original doubt to the excitement. At last, even the talisman god hovering 3 feet above his head began shaking intensely, and numerous spell symbols began moving. Obviously, he couldn't wait to try this cultivation technique. This cultivation technique modified by Luo Fan was more than 100 times more powerful than the previous one. The combination of spell symbols described in this cultivation technique had all the powers and abilities of the previous combination of millions of spell symbols. It combined all spell symbols that could be used repeatedly and borrowed from each other in a mysterious way. It simplified all the parts that could be simplified, and achieved the same function with some simpler spell symbol structures. The difference between the two was like the difference between a program written by a supreme programmer and a program written by an ordinary student. The difference between the two was like the difference between the sky and the earth. Yusu's talisman god, which was composed of countless spell symbols, was created by him from the combination of time spell symbols, and it also had a subtle, time-changing effect. Unlike the combination of time spell symbols, which could change the time in the surrounding space, this effect could only change the time that Yusu had experienced. Therefore, 1 year of time that Yusu had experienced was equivalent to 2 years of time for the others. From this, it could be imagined that if he had comprehended this combination of time runes 1 yuanhui ago, then he would have spent at least 4 yuanhui cultivating the great way of runes until now. Moreover, this was completely based on his perception of the time. This also explained why his appearance looked so old. Luo Fan thought for a moment. If he couldn't find any hope of making progress in such a long period of time, and couldn't find a way to break through the bottleneck, then how urgent would he be to make progress? Therefore, Luo Fan clearly understood Yusu's eagerness. However, even though he understood, he had to stop Yusu. Seeing that Yusu was about to recombine the spell symbols, Yusu hurriedly raised his hand and pointed at the sky. The space vibrated, then the cultivation technique modified by Luo Fan suddenly paused and shrank into a blue light spot in the air. Immediately, Yusu was blocked from observing this cultivation technique. After all, it wasn't the right time to recombine the spell symbols. As this cultivation technique condensed into a blue light spot, Yusu woke up abruptly. He was a bit surprised, then anxiously looked at Luo Fan. "My friend, you are a bit impatient. The talisman god is your foundation. You have to be careful if you want to make any changes in it. How can you recombine it in such a hurry?" said Luo Fan smilingly. Yusu was too impulsive. "Thank you for your guidance." Hearing Luo Fan, Yusu knew that he had indeed been thoughtless. Cold sweat oozed out of his forehead. If he started recombining the talisman god the moment he saw this cultivation technique, without even studying it, the success rate would be no more than 50%. After all, after being modified by Luo Fan, this cultivation technique was many times more mysterious than the one Yusu had been cultivating before. The various matching methods of the spell symbols contained countless truths that Yusu didn't understand. This was the reason why Luo Fan believed that his modification would hinder Yusu's future cultivation. Because Yusu didn't understand these truths, he had to fully understand them before he could make any further progress. After condensing the talisman god, it would take much more effort to understand these mysteries. If Yusu wanted to recombine the talisman god, he had to follow the original method, and the possibility of making mistakes was not small. If he recombined the talisman god now, the possibility of making mistakes would increase by many times. As the creator of the great Tao of spell symbols, Yusu already had the privilege to have a success rate of 50%, which was beyond everyone's understanding of the great Tao of spell symbols. Other people might not even have this success rate. Seeing Yusu's expression, Luo Fan knew that Yusu had already understood his idea. Smiling, Luo Fan let the blue light spot float in front of Yusu. The talisman god 3 feet above Yusu's head rotated, absorbed the blue light spot, and integrated it into it. Then, with a loud bang, this bit of spiritual light exploded, transforming it into countless memories that fused together with his will. Then, he raised his hand and pointed up. The talisman god, which was as big as a human head, suddenly sank down, and sank into his body from the top of his head. I dare not lie to you, my lord. The great Tao of spell symbols was comprehended by this thing in the untainted land 1 yuan hui ago. Yusu can't repay your great kindness, so I would like to offer this thing to you. After Yusu put the talisman god into his body, he thought for a while, and took out an item from the rune space he had opened. Chapter 148. Simplified Talisman God, Source of Talisman Taoism. 2. What Yusu took out was an oval object the size of a watermelon. This object was black and looked like a black stone, but it also looked like a very strange egg, and even more like an incomparably strange seed. The moment he saw this object, Luo Fan felt that his mind was shaken. Even the Buzhou mountain in his sea of consciousness, which had been stable for tens of thousands of years, unexpectedly began to shake restlessly. Among them, there was an incomparable desire and familiarity that surged into his heart. It was as if the object in front of him had an incomparably close connection with him, and if he could devour it, he would receive incomparably great benefits. Luo Fan's great sun golden pupil and bright moon silver pupil enveloped this strange object, trying to see through it. But the result was disappointing. He couldn't see through it at all. The precursors of the 2 Pangu chaotic heavenly pupils looked at it carefully for a long time, but they still had no idea what kind of shape it was inside. He could only faintly sense the endless life force surging inside this thing with his super strong power. At most, there was a trace of pure wood qi of high quality. These characteristics were very similar to a certain object, a seed. This is a seed? Luo Fan couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. If this thing was really a seed, what kind of amazing tree would it eventually grow into? Hearing Luo Fan's words, Yusu's eyes lit up and he said, "So your excellency really knows about this item, Yusu can rest assured. I've already obtained this object for a period of time. Even though I've comprehended the grand Tao of talismans from it, I don't know what it is at all, nor do I know what kind of power it possesses. It's truly a waste for this object to remain in my hands. I hope that your honor won't discard it and allow it to shine brilliantly." As he spoke, he raised his hand without hesitation, and the strange tree slowly floated in front of Luo Fan. Luo Fan raised his right hand absent-mindedly and gently took it. The moment his right hand came into contact with this suspected tree, the familiar feeling became even more intense and shocking. He almost couldn't suppress the impulse in his heart to devour this tree. It's actually related to me. What is this thing? What kind of power does it have? Luo Fan suppressed his urge to devour it and thought to himself. Before figuring out what it was and what it did, the cautious Luo Fan would never devour something of unknown origin. With a light wave of his left hand, countless three-dimensional talismans that were as tiny as ants flew out of his hand. Like a silkworm spinning silk to spin a cocoon, the talismans wrapped around the strange tree, one by one. In a short while, the object was tightly wrapped within, leaving not a single gap. As the talisman's silk cocoon took shape, there was a flash of light. After the light faded, This thing that seemed to be a seed was completely sealed by him. At this moment, the feeling of wanting to devour this suspected tree seed that had emerged from the depths of his heart and soul finally disappeared. This feeling is too scary. Luo Fan's heart was full of lingering fear. Being controlled by instinct was very natural for ordinary people, but for someone like him who had attained the earthly immortal Tao fruit, it was quite a frightening thing. Not only him, but anyone with this level of cultivation would absolutely be repelled by it. At this moment, he was sure that this thing that seemed to be a seed was absolutely of great importance. Even the golden eyes of the sun and the silver eyes of the bright moon could not see through it. If he devoured it just now because of the impulse in his heart, he would definitely regret it in the future. Seeing that Luo Fan was so serious that he even wanted to seal it, Yusu couldn't help but be surprised. This thing had been in his hands for such a long time, and he had painstakingly studied it for several yuanhui, but he had only obtained the combination of time and light talismans from it. He didn't know what kind of strange phenomenon it had, and what kind of strange power it had. I didn't modify the cultivation method for you to receive a reward, so I shouldn't have accepted this thing. It's just that this thing seems to be of great importance and has a very close connection with me, so I can't give it up. Well, I'll refine a magic tool for you to exchange for this thing, Luo Fan said, holding the strange tree seed. This is a small token of my appreciation, and it can't repay the great kindness of Your Excellency. If Your Excellency says so, where does Your Excellency want to put me? Yusu said in a panic. This matter is decided. I already know your intention, but you should accept it, and you shouldn't accept it, Luo Fan said with a slight smile. Yusu refused for a while, almost using all kinds of curses and oaths, but Luo Fan was quite resolute and unmoved. In desperation, although he was perturbed, he could only reluctantly agree. Seeing that Yusu had agreed, Luo Fan put the sealed strange tree seed into his sleeve. He began to explain to Yusu the change Tao of talisman's cultivation method. Yusu knew that this was a rare opportunity, so he listened to Luo Fan carefully with all his attention, and carefully asked Luo Fan about all kinds of things that he didn't understand. When he began to listen to Luo Fan's explanation, Yusu realized how rash it was to reconstruct the talisman deity on the spot. It was also at this time that he realized that this Tao of talisman's cultivation method had been improved to a very high level after being modified by Luo Fan. His gratitude to Luo Fan had reached a new height, and his attitude towards Luo Fan had become even more respectful than that of Luo Fan's real disciples. This question and answer session lasted for a full 3 months before it ended. After spending nearly 3 months, Luo Fan barely explained the whole cultivation method to Yusu, which gave Yusu a rough understanding of its secrets. After being modified by Luo Fan, this talisman Grand Tao cultivation technique had become all-encompassing and all-encompassing. If Yusu wanted to truly comprehend it, he would have to expend an enormous amount of effort and a long period of time to study it. However, with such a rough understanding of its secrets, it was enough to reconstruct the talisman deity. On this day, Yusu opened his eyes, which had been closed for a long time, and bowed to Luo Fan, saying, "Yusu thinks that I can reconstruct the talisman deity. What else do you want me to do, Your Honor?" Luo Fan smiled and said, "With your mastery of the cultivation method, this is the right time to reconstruct the talisman deity. You only need to remember one sentence: all changes have their origins." "Thank you for your guidance, Your Honor." When Yusu heard the words, "all changes have their origins," he instantly felt as if countless comprehensions had emerged in his heart. He knew that this was a famous saying, and he hurriedly bowed to express his gratitude. Luo Fan nodded, raised his hand, and waved. The cave abode suddenly opened, and in the blink of an eye, the two of them were already hundreds of feet above Yushui. The place where he sat was the core of the cave abode, and the cave abode was naturally under his control, so there was no need to say anything. When the two of them arrived above the Yu River, an endless amount of innate water essence quickly gathered towards them. Within the span of a breath, an azure-blue cloud had formed under their feet. It was hundreds of acres in circumference, and looked quite magnificent. Luo Fan didn't stay on the cloud, and with a step, he came to the place where he first landed in Yushui, a small mountain beside Yushui. Reconstructing the talisman deity was not a small project. The whole process would cause an endless amount of energy to explode and produce tremendous energy waves. It could also cause the evil qi in the world to gather and surge, and then form an extremely powerful heavenly tribulation. If the talisman deity was reconstructed in Yusu's cave abode, it could be predicted that by the time Yusu finished reconstructing the talisman deity, the cave abode would most likely no longer exist. After all, the heavenly tribulation was only a side product. Although it was powerful, it was far less than what Yusu could endure. With his cultivation level, he shouldn't be in any danger. Therefore, Luo Fan wasn't worried that he would go through the heavenly tribulation. He didn't have the time to pay attention to Yusu, and immediately decided to refine the magic tool for Yu, who that he promised 3 months ago. He frowned and pondered. After a while, he decided what kind of magic tool he should refine for Yu Hu. After he made up his mind, he waved his left hand, and thousands of materials of different sizes flew out from his universe in sleeve. None of these materials were ordinary, but none of them were too precious. They were materials that could be easily found in this primitive world. The great sun golden eyes and the bright moon silver eyes covered these materials. In an instant, countless information flowed into his mind. After analyzing the information and combining it with his own thoughts, Luo Fan had determined the entire process of refining the magic tool, including every spell used, every talisman cast, and every restriction formed. After Luo Fan left, Yusu's body suddenly shook. The blue, head-sized talisman deity rushed out from the top of his head and came to a height of 3 feet above his head. Without stopping, he raised his hand and pointed at the talisman deity according to the method that he had thought about countless times over the past 3 months. In an instant, the hundreds of thousands of talisman characters inside the talisman deity began to move around crazily. The blue light emitted by the talisman deity flickered. At the same time, there were countless cracking sounds coming from the talisman deity. An incomparably strong and terrifying energy wave was constantly emitted from the talisman deity, spreading in all directions. It was as if a nuclear bomb was about to be detonated. That kind of aura was like the coming of a mountain rain, and the world was about to turn upside down. However, this kind of energy wave was being suppressed by some kind of mysterious aura, and was being controlled in a process that was about to explode. Following this change, countless malevolent qi continued to condense at the top of Yusu's head, gradually forming a colorful cloud. It was very beautiful but also extremely dangerous. The area covered by the cloud became wider and wider as the malevolent qi condensed. Soon it had covered an area of 100 acres. Among them, the malevolent qi and malevolent qi collided, causing all kinds of mysterious changes, and countless wind and thunder were produced. These wind and thunder kept flashing in the cloud, giving off muffled sounds of thunder. It was obvious that some kind of incredible change was brewing. Open! At this time, Yusu made a prompt decision and shouted. Following his shout, the blue talisman deity above his head suddenly exploded, turning into a blue cloud that was 1 acre in size, circling above his head. Within the cloud, there were hundreds of thousands of talisman characters, like fish that had been released, crazily shuttling back and forth, madly colliding with each other. Following this change, the tribulation cloud in the sky suddenly moved. Raindrops of colorful lightning fell from the sky, heading straight for Yusu. In an instant, Yusu was drowned in it, blocking the vision of the outside world, so that no one could know what was happening inside. Chapter 149. The 3-Day Heavenly Tribulation. Naturally, Luo Fan didn't care how miserable Yusu's cries were. The heavenly tribulation was a process of tempering the fleshly body and the divine soul. How could it not be painful? At this moment, he had already focused all his attention on the magical artifact that he was about to forge. Combining Yusu's great Tao of runes, the magical artifact Luo Fan designed contained endless mysteries, and its power was extremely amazing. Its name was the Wheel of Time. After examining the thousands of materials that flew out of his sleeve and finding no mistakes, Luo Fan raised his hand and waved it gently. In front of him, the thousands of materials were wrapped up by an extremely pure innate water essence that burned like a raging flame. The blue water flame appeared out of thin air, but like a real flame, it kept licking the thousands of materials. It kept burning these materials, producing the effect that only a flame could have. Under the burning, the materials kept being purified, melted, and gradually interweaved into one. During this process, faint black smoke kept rising from the materials that were gradually melting into a mass of liquid, then was turned into nothingness by the blue water flame and dissipated between the heaven and the earth. As the water flame burned, the thousands of materials became smaller and smaller, and their quality became higher and higher. After a long while, the thousands of materials had been purified into a basketball-sized liquid ball, flashing with a mysterious light, like a dream, extremely beautiful. Being enveloped by the azure flames, it was like an azure fireball descending from the 9 heavens. It was incomparably mystical and wonderful. Golden and silver light flashed in Luo Fan's eyes, and he let out a soft cry. The cry was like a wonderful heavenly sound that came from the void, containing the infinite great Tao of heaven and earth, and lingered for a long time. As he let out the cry, a series of mysterious and unfathomable mantras, countless runes, and countless talismans flowed through his mind. At the same time, the earthly immortal's Tao fruit in his body exploded with a loud bang. It transformed into a mysterious and unfathomable manna that flowed along his meridians and came out in an incomparably mysterious path. Every time the magic power circulated, a mysterious three-dimensional talisman would rush out from his palm and directly into the liquid ball that was enveloped by the azure water flame. Under the effect of the water flame, the talisman would combine with the material liquid ball, forming an organic and mysterious whole. The three-dimensional talisman did not stop for even a moment. The whole process was completely under the control of Luo Fan's mind. Whether it was the choice of the 3D talisman, the appearance of the 3D talisman, or the combination of the 3D talisman and the materials, none of it was out of his control. It was completely under his absolute control, and everything went according to the plan he had thought of before. Time passed by unknowingly. Unknowingly, Luo Fan's magic power had already circulated 129,600 times in his body. There were as many as 129,600 three-dimensional talismans that were slapped out from his palm. It was exactly the number of 1 yuan. With these 129,600 three-dimensional talismans, the liquid material that was enveloped by the azure water flame also underwent a very subtle and even more mysterious change. The light that was constantly flowing on the slightly trembling liquid became restrained and simple. It seemed to contain infinite mysterious principles, and also seemed to be all-encompassing, almost like a miniature world was being nurtured in it. At this point, 3 days and 3 nights had already passed. Although it was not the first time for Luo Fan to spend these 3 days and 3 nights to refine a magic tool, it was still considered rare. The reason for this was that the power of this magic tool was really quite amazing. If this magic tool was upgraded to the magic treasure realm, it would have the effect of being invincible among those of the same level. Even Luo Fan's Void Wuji Palace, in terms of attack power, might not necessarily be able to match it. After the 29,600 three-dimensional talismans rushed into the liquid ball, Luo Fan suddenly raised his hand and slapped it hard. An infinite force was born out of thin air, like a giant hand, constantly rubbing the liquid ball that was enveloped by the azure water flame. As the light flickered, an unimaginably grand aura gradually emitted from it. Then, the void within a radius of 10 feet around the liquid ball seemed to be slightly distorted and a little blurred, almost covering the transformation process of the liquid ball's shape. This was not because the great power of the magic tool distorted the space. Instead, it was because the time around this magic tool had undergone a very strange change. This change was as if the void within a radius of 10 feet had been cut out from the untainted world. It made the time in it independent, as if it was no longer shackled by the time of the untainted world. Chi, a light sound rang out leisurely, like the sound of the void itself, spreading in all directions. It was melodious and pleasant to listen to, but it also contained some kind of strange vitality. The liquid ball suddenly condensed along with this sound, and then inhaled again, sucking the blazing water flame into it. In the blink of an eye, it had turned into a very strange wheel-shaped object. This wheel-shaped object was about 3 feet in diameter, and more than an inch thick. Its front, from the inside to the outside, was almost equally divided into 3 layers. The central layer was a solid circle, and the top was gray like chaos. It seemed to contain everything in the world, but also seemed to contain nothingness, as if nothing existed. The layer outwards from the center was evenly divided into 1,296 grids. Among these squares, there was a very mysterious talisman engraved with a very mysterious color on each square. Looking at it with the naked eye, these 1,296 talismans seemed to come to life, slightly vibrating and circulating in the squares, as if they were vibrating and circulating in a world. The outermost layer was only divided into 12 squares. Every single one of these 12 squares was inscribed with a complicated and profound character created by Pangu. When these characters were combined together, they were Zi, Chou, Yin, Mao, Chen, Si, Wu, Wei, Shen, Yu, Su, Hai. Every single character had an extremely subtle and profound connection with the 1,296 talismans on the upper layer, and they even seemed to possess unimaginably formidable might. The wheel spun slightly in midair, and specks of mysterious heavenly tunes were ceaselessly emanated during this process. At the same time, a strand of an ancient and desolate aura surged out from this wheel-shaped object, and it allowed others to know that it possessed boundless might with a single glance. This was the Wheel of Time. It was a magic artifact that Luo Fan had designed by relying on the combination of the talismans of time and the restriction refinement technique. It contained 18 layers of restrictions within it, and it possessed the ability to change time. Its might was so formidable that it had arrived at an unimaginable state. So long as this wheel was utilized, then it would be able to change the flow of time within a certain area. No matter if it was utilized for offense or defense, it possessed unimaginable effects. Once it was completed, then one only had to utilize this treasure, and it would be equivalent to taking complete control of a certain area of the primordial world. The person who utilized this treasure would even be able to control time and space within this area, and it would be practically omnipotent. Luo Fan heaved a sigh of relief when he saw this magic artifact take form, and then he raised his hand and gestured lightly, causing the Wheel of Time to float lightly into his hand. With a slight shake, the 3 layers of the wheel slowly rotated. Talismans flowed and characters moved about, and the chaotic scene at the center surged while waves of heavenly tunes resounded from within it. Moreover, the space in an area of 3m in front of him warped intensely because of this. He raised his leg and stabbed it into the mountain like tofu, and then he raised it again, causing an ordinary stone to be pulled out from the mountain and kicked into the area of 3m that was intensely warped. A mysterious change occurred because of this. The stone was decaying at a speed that was visible to the naked eye, and after a short while, it had already transformed into gravel before transforming into powder that was blown away by the wind and vanished without a trace. From the looks of it, it seemed as if thousands of years had passed. As expected, it succeeded. This magic artifact is quite powerful. Although it is not as powerful as that strange tree, it is not too far off. When Luo Fan saw this, he could not help but smile. Thinking about this, he raised his hand and shook it lightly. The 3 layers of the wheel of time that were rotating stopped, and all the abnormal changes returned to normal. The space in an area of 3m in front of him also completely returned to normal. The power of this magic artifact was quite powerful. At this moment, it could already speed up time to more than 10,000 times the normal speed. In the short period of time that the stone had entered, the stone had already experienced hundreds of years. After such a long period of time, an ordinary stone had completely decayed after losing the nourishment of energy. It's a pity that this ability to speed up time is powerful, but it's too unstable. It can't be used to assist in cultivation at all. Otherwise, I would have unlimited cultivation time. Luo Fan was slightly dissatisfied. Because this magic artifact was designed for attack and not to assist in cultivation, it sacrificed the stability of changing time and did its best to increase the intensity of changing time. Therefore, although this magic artifact's ability to change time was very strong, it was extremely unstable and extremely difficult to control. This changing time was changing almost every moment. The speed of the flow of time might be 10,000 times the normal time at this moment, but in the next moment, it might become a 10,000th or even a trillion times the normal time. This method of changing time was excellent to be used for attack, but if it was used to assist in cultivation, it would be courting death. This was very easy to understand. Perhaps one originally intended to speed up the cultivation time by several times, but after triggering the ability to change time, one would find that the speed of time was actually hundreds of thousands of times. By the time the effect wore off, perhaps hundreds of millions of years had passed, and the cultivator inside would have already collapsed and died. After secretly laughing at his own greed, Luo Fan raised his hand and put the wheel of time into his universe in his sleeve. At this time, although 3 days and 3 nights had passed, Yusu still had not passed the heavenly tribulation. He was still drowned and covered by the countless 5-colored heavenly lightning, still groaning and screaming from time to time. Luo Fan looked up, and the great sun golden eyes and bright moon silver eyes automatically transmitted the scene behind the 5-colored heavenly lightning into his mind. Chapter 150. Crystal Talisman God, borrowing strength from Yu Water. At this moment, the blue cloud transformed from the explosion of Yu Chi's Talisman God had shrunk to nearly 10 times its original size. However, its power did not diminish in the slightest. Instead, it seemed to have become more condensed, purer, and more profound. Among them, the cloud originally contained nearly 1,000,000 spell symbols, but now it was reduced to 129,600, which was nearly 10 times its original size. These 29,600 spell symbols were affecting each other in a mysterious way, trying their best to merge together. During this process, they were constantly shrinking and recombining, trying to merge into a new, more mysterious talisman god. The raindrop-like 5-colored thunderbolts released from the tribulation cloud in the sky completely wrapped up the blue cloud and Yusu's body, bursting with incomparably strong attacks, bombarding both of them. Every time a 5-colored thunderbolt touched Yusu's body, his body and the cloud above his head would involuntarily vibrate intensely. The vibrations seemed to have some kind of magical principle, like a piece of pig iron that was being hammered endlessly and turning into steel, producing some mysterious and unpredictable changes. Yusu's old and weird-looking body gradually changed along with the hammering. During the 3 days and 3 nights of hammering, his original appearance, which was obviously that of a turtle-shaped life form, had unknowingly transformed into a born Tao body. The unconcealable ancientness had completely disappeared. By the time Luo Fan observed, Yu-Su had turned into a short and strong middle-aged man. Yu-Su didn't pay any attention to the changes of his body. At the moment, he had put all his energy into controlling the process of condensing and recombining the 29,600 spell symbols. In fact, if Yu-Su knew the changes of his body now, he would definitely be overjoyed, and might even divert his energy from condensing the talisman god. The reason for that was because Yu-Su's current body wasn't his natural body. Instead, it was a body that he was unable to transform into a connate Taoist aptitude when he was cultivating the great Tao of runes. The reason why he had turned into such a nondescript state was because his talisman Tao was incomplete. It was incomplete and had countless flaws. Now, before the heavenly tribulation was over, he had already transformed into such a perfect-born Taoism body. Not only had he achieved his initial goal of transformation, but he had also proved that the great way of runes modified by Luo Fan had almost reached a state of perfection. He had reached the stage where he had completely excavated the essence of the Tao of runes. How could he not be pleasantly surprised? At this moment it was already the final stage. The 5-colored lightning seemed to have been stimulated and became even more intense. These bolts of lightning were densely packed and seemed to cover the sky and earth. It was as if a 5-colored canopy had covered the entire world. Due to the changes in the 5-colored lightning, Yu-Su's body and the blue auspicious cloud above his head shook even more violently, and the frequency of their vibrations also increased. Right when the bombardment of the 5-colored lightning reached its peak and was about to cover Luo Fan's line of sight once more, Yu-Su suddenly let out a long howl towards the sky. His voice was clear and impassioned, and it shook the surrounding heavens and the earth. As he roared, he formed a mysterious hand seal with both hands, and a mysterious and exquisite rune suddenly appeared between his hands. As the rune appeared, an extremely terrifying suction force was generated. In an instant, it tore apart the endless wind and thunder around him, causing the 5-colored lightning, which was like a canopy in the sky, to rapidly gather towards the rune. It was like a river flowing into the sea, or like a black hole attracting stars. In just a short while, the rune between his hands was dyed with 5 colors, and it emitted a dazzling and blinding light. The huge 5-colored tribulation cloud in the sky, which was hundreds of acres in size, also turned into a 5-colored tornado that descended from the sky along with the suction force, charging straight towards the mysterious rune. In just a breath's time, all of them had disappeared into it, causing the entire sky to become clear. At this point, all the tribulation clouds and the 5-colored lightning had completely disappeared, leaving only a mysterious rune shining with dazzling 5-colored light floating between Yu-Su's hands. After receiving the boundless 5-colored lightning bolts and the 100-acre-wide tribulation cloud, this mysterious and exquisite talisman seemed to have become extremely unstable. It slightly vibrated in his hands, as if it could disintegrate at any time. At the same time, Yu-Su's face also showed a strenuous expression, and his face was even slightly pale. Obviously, devouring the entire tribulation cloud was a great burden for Yu-Su. From the looks of it, it was about to exceed what he could bear. Luo Fan stood on a distant mountain peak, quietly watching Yu-Su's method. At this moment, without the cover of the 5-colored lightning, he could see clearly even without the help of his golden eyes and silver eyes. When he saw the 5-colored rune between his hands, he could not help but sigh. It's still a little rushed, but with his accumulation of several yuan hui, the possibility of success is very high. Just as he was thinking about this, Yu-Su had already moved on to the next step. He suddenly raised his hands and slapped them upwards. The 5-colored rune rushed straight up, and in the blink of an eye, it disappeared into the blue auspicious cloud. Boom! A huge explosion resounded, like an earth-shattering thunderclap. The 5-colored rune exploded amidst the thunderclap, and an incomparably powerful shockwave spread out in all directions. The powerful shockwave caused the blue cloud to instantly expand by 100 times. From its original size, it expanded to the size of 10 acres. The 129,600 runes that were constantly swimming and recombining in the auspicious cloud seemed to have obtained infinite power, and their swimming and recombining speed increased by more than 10 times. In the process of the 129,600 runes recombining, the entire blue auspicious cloud shrank at an extremely fast speed. In just a short while, it had shrunk to the size of a fist, turning into a sparkling and translucent rune combination. It was like a crystal with countless faces, and it slowly rotated above Yusu's head. Within the countless crystals, there were 129,600 runes that were moving about according to some kind of profound trajectory. They were twisting and changing unpredictably, giving off an extremely profound aura. It was as if the endless mysteries of the world were contained within them. "Fuse!" Yusu suddenly shouted. With this shout, the sparkling and translucent crystal suddenly sank, and directly entered his head from the top of his head, instantly fusing with his body. As the crystal fused with his body, Yusu's body suddenly emitted a mysterious but very strange aura. It was as if he had fused with the whole world, and with every breath he took, there would be endless wind and clouds fusing. It was also as if he was standing in the void like a complete and perfect existence, independent from the whole world. The two completely opposite auras interweaved, forming a mysterious characteristic that was both contradictory and unified, and there was a mysterious aura that directly emitted. Seeing this, Luo Fan's attentive expression didn't weaken in the slightest. Because he knew that this was not the final result. The test for Yusu was not completely over. Just now, when Luo Fan finished practicing the Wheel of Time and came to pay attention to Yusu's tribulation, the reconstruction of the Talisman God had already stepped into the final stage. But under normal circumstances, it would at least take a few more hours to complete the reconstruction. Moreover, after that, it would take a few years or even a few decades or even hundreds of years to carefully sculpt it, so that the Talisman God could finally become completely crystal clear, complete and stable. At this moment, the reason he was able to complete the transformation so quickly was because he'd absorbed the entire five-colored tribulation cloud into the Talisman God, and then he'd utilized the impact force to catalyze the reconstruction of the Talisman God. However, even though it was fast, his cultivation level had to be extremely high to the extent that he could control all the energy contained in the entire tribulation cloud, and only then would he be able to expel the energy of the five-colored tribulation cloud from his body after the Talisman God entered his body. In other words, at this moment Yusu was still missing the last step, and it was also the most dangerous step. If Yusu was unable to expel the energy of the five-colored tribulation cloud from his body, then the energy of the five-colored tribulation cloud would ceaselessly wreak havoc in his body, causing the reconstructed Talisman God to crack once more. And it was even more likely that his natural Tao physique, that he'd reconstructed with great difficulty, would continuously collapse for a period of time until it completely dissipated in the end. At that time, if he was unable to think of a way to expel the energy of the five-colored tribulation cloud from his body, then what awaited him would be death, and his soul would disperse. Shortcuts had never been an easy path to take. Yusu showed a serious look on his face. Abruptly, he raised both of his hands and instantly, countless hands appeared around his body, wrapping him up. Down below, under his feet, the pre-world water essence, which had condensed into a blue cloud, suddenly condensed into a giant, three-dimensional spell symbol that looked like a funnel. After the three-dimensional spell symbol appeared, the tip of its tail wrapped around Yusu, while its head was connected to the surface of the water. Next, the funnel began spinning quickly. During this process, strands of five-colored energy were forced out of Yusu's body by the endless pre-world water essence, ceaselessly flowing into the water through the funnel. Smart. Seeing this, Luo Fan couldn't help but praise. What Yu Su was doing was taking advantage of the fact that he had already refined the Yu water. With the tremendous amount of water and the endless pre-world water essence contained in the Yu water, Yu Su could generate a strong attractive force and pressure through a special circulation method, thus forcing and extracting all the energy that did not belong to him out of his body. Even though Yu Su was an innate god, even though he had attained the realm of Tao of an earth immortal, he still had a great sense of the river, which was formed by nature, or Pan-gu. Naturally, it was not difficult for him to extract the energy with the help of the Yu water. Seeing this, Luo Fan knew that Yu Su would no longer be in danger. As expected, half a day later, the last strand of 5-colored energy was drawn out of Yu Su's body. The funnel-shaped spell symbol condensed from the endless pre-world water essence suddenly exploded and surged into the Yu water down below. Chapter 151. It was the Supreme Sky Tree. There's no need to thank me for this. It's just a piece of cake, Luo Fan said with a smile. As he spoke, he raised his hand and an invisible force appeared out of thin air, slowly lifting Yu Su up. At this time, Yu Su's hidden danger in the great Tao of talismans was gone, and there was a possibility that he could improve further. However, this did not mean that his cultivation realm would improve too much in an instant. Although the invisible force that Luo Fan had been released casually, it had reached a level that Yu Su could not resist. Under this invisible force, although Yu Su did not feel the need to thank him and had already planned to continue, he was completely unable to resist this vast and infinite force. He could only helplessly straighten his body and say, "Yu Su will never forget your great kindness. In the future, if you have any orders, Yu Su will do anything." Luo Fan smiled and shook his head, but he also knew that if he continued to say anything, it would only be a waste of time. There was no meaning to it at all. Therefore, he took a step forward and came in front of Yu Su. He stood in the void with Yu Su and was extremely stable, as if they were standing on an invisible platform. This magic artifact is called the Wheel of Time, and it has many effects. I give it to you today to repay you for giving me the seed. Although the value of the two can't be compared, it's a token of my appreciation. Luo Fan shook his left hand and the Wheel of Time that was originally in his sleeve appeared in his hand. Yu Su was just about to decline, but Luo Fan had already sent the Wheel of Time to him. The momentum made him instinctively catch the Wheel of Time. As soon as the Wheel of Time was in his hand, Yu Su's eyes became blank. In an instant, endless information flowed from this mysterious magic artifact into his talisman divinity, and it was constantly and rapidly transformed into his memory. After carefully reading the information, Yu Su found that the information was about the effect of the Wheel of Time, about how to refine the Wheel of Time, about how to strengthen the restrictions on the Wheel of Time, about how to make the Wheel of Time into a magic weapon, about how to use the Wheel of Time to exert its greatest power, and so on. Although Yu Su had already mastered the great Tao of talismans, and his cultivation was extremely high, his absorption speed was extremely slow when it came to this mysterious information that belonged to a completely different system. Hence, it took him almost half a day to completely sort out all the information and orderly store it in his memory. I can't believe there's such a wonderful method in this world. What an eye-opener! Yu Su murmured as he came back to his senses. He opened his eyes and looked around, wanting to find Luo Fan to thank him. However, he discovered that Luo Fan, who had been standing in front of him, had already disappeared without a trace. He had long since flown away. "My lord, even though you're unwilling to take me as your disciple, you're already my most revered master in my heart." Yu Su's thoughts were sharp, and he knew that Luo Fan was unwilling to be entangled in the matter of the magic artifact with him, so he left. So, the gratitude in his heart was simply indescribable. Yu Su's experiences in these past few days could be said to be like a dream. At this moment, he was unprecedentedly certain that meeting Luo Fan was the luckiest thing that had happened in his life. Even the luck he obtained from obtaining that mysterious tree was far inferior to meeting Luo Fan, because meeting Luo Fan hadn't just eliminated the hidden dangers in his great Tao of talismans, it had allowed him to possess a direct path to the Grand Tao. Moreover, it had allowed him to refine a magic artifact and become a magic treasure, and it allowed him to have the possibility of living freely in the world. The benefits he'd obtained were so great that it had a great impact on his future cultivation, and it had already reached a level that he couldn't believe. After a while, Yusu realized that his body was no longer in that unsightly state of the past. Instead, it had become the natural Taoist aptitude that he dreamt of in the past. He couldn't help but be overjoyed, and he raised his hands in front of him. As his strength surged, a blue light flickered repeatedly. Is this the natural Taoist aptitude? This kind of agility, this kind of harmony with heaven and earth, it really isn't something that those dabblers from before can compare to. Luo Fan naturally left while Yusu was immersed in the information he'd transmitted. In fact, for Luo Fan, the benefits he'd obtained on this trip were already beyond his imagination. The great Tao of talismans was also a great expansion for him, increasing his knowledge and letting him know that there was another way to seek the great Tao in this world. In a way, it allowed him to better understand his own great Tao. At the same time, the combination of the time runes was an even more direct gain. With this combination of runes, if Luo Fan wanted to refine a magic artifact in the future, he would have another choice. It was more likely that the magic artifact would have the attribute of time, and the power of the magic artifact would become even more mysterious and incredible. By the time Yusu woke up and realized that he'd already achieved the natural Taoist aptitude, Luo Fan had already arrived at the mountainside of a 10,000-meter tall mountain that was at least 30 million miles away from where Yusu was. There was a very large source of chaotic vitality there. Although the chaotic vitality emanating from this source was not as strong as the one at the top of Buzhou Mountain, it wasn't too far off. It was extremely rare in the untainted land. In the depths of a small cave, Luo Fan sat cross-legged on this huge source of chaotic vitality. With a wave of his hand, he took out the watermelon-sized strange tree from the world in the sleeve. At this moment, the strange tree that was wrapped and sealed by the talisman silk cocoon was still faintly exuding a very strong life force. Wisps of pure wood chi surged in this life force and were transmitted into Luo Fan's mind. Thinking back to the time when the tree was not sealed, Luo Fan's heart was filled with doubts, and the impulse to completely devour it arose from the depths of his spirit. After attaining the fruit of the earthly immortal's way, his control over everything, whether it was his body or his spirit, had reached an extremely shocking level. From then on, he could easily control his desires and impulses. After he reconstructed his Taoist heart, this kind of control had almost reached the state of being omnipotent. However, it was this super strong control that seemed to have completely disappeared in the face of this strange tree, causing him to almost succumb to this impulse. This was indeed quite strange. What kind of tree is this? Why does it make me feel this way? Luo Fan thought. After thinking for a moment, he raised his hand and gently covered it, breaking the seal that enveloped the tree. Wisps of innate water essence and the source of chaotic vitality below surged and spread in all directions, dissolving into the endless chaotic vitality around him. In an instant, the endless vitality skyrocketed, almost covering the sky and the earth, and filled his entire mind. At the same time, the feeling of impatience to devour this tree appeared again, and it became even stronger. That kind of extreme impulse, extreme desire, made it almost impossible for Luo Fan to resist, but it was only almost. Because he was mentally prepared, although Luo Fan felt the various impulses in his heart, he was still able to maintain his calmness, and barely maintain his reason. Yusu comprehended the great way of runes from it. The secret contained in it must be quite extraordinary. As Luo Fan thought to himself, the fruit of the earthly immortal's way in his body suddenly exploded, turning into a magical power that slowly circulated and slowly rushed out of his left hand with his consciousness. After breaking through the slight obstruction, it slowly seeped into this tree. As this magical power flowed into the tree, it instantly emitted hundreds of millions of grayish-brown scattered light. This scattered light was extremely penetrating, almost covering the entire cave, and even the gray chaotic vitality could not cause the slightest hindrance to it. At this time, Luo Fan's consciousness that entered the tree along with the magical power fell into an incomparably mysterious world. That kind of intense desire to devour was already extremely far away from him at this time, and it could no longer affect his reason at all. There was an endless vitality inside the tree, and inside it, there was also extremely condensed, extremely pure wood chi wrapped by the vitality. This is a three-dimensional talisman. Luo Fan did not care about this, for he was already shocked by the scene that his consciousness perceived. In this tree, in the center of the upgraded and pure wood chi, an incomparably tall tree imprinted in his mind and consciousness. This was an incomparably tall tree, with straight branches and well-developed roots, looking like a giant barbell standing horizontally on the ground. This whole tree was not a real entity, but a three-dimensional talisman that was formed by the condensation of wisps of mysterious energy into energy threads. The outline of this three-dimensional talisman was extremely similar to the structure of the Buzhou Mountain in the world of Luo Fan's consciousness. Although they were two completely different three-dimensional talismans, with one look, one could tell that they had two completely different mysteries. However, the two of them were unexpectedly very compatible and very harmonious. Yu Su's Tao of Runes was actually comprehended from this three-dimensional talisman. It's really a great opportunity. Seeing this, Luo Fan could not help but sigh in his heart. After his consciousness and his magical power circled around the tree a few times, Luo Fan already knew the internal structure of this tree. Although this tree seemed to be only the size of a watermelon from the outside, under the effect of the tree-shaped three-dimensional talisman, it opened up an ellipsoidal space with a diameter of tens of thousands of zhang. This space was filled with endless vitality and pure wood chi. The vitality and wood chi were divided into two layers. The vitality was outside, and the wood chi was inside. The division between the two was very subtle and mysterious, as if it contained some incredible truth, so that every time Luo Fan's consciousness swept through it, he would feel a little bit of enlightenment. Inside the wood chi was the huge tree-shaped three-dimensional talisman, which almost filled the entire wood chi layer. Looking at this tree-shaped three-dimensional talisman carefully, Luo Fan somehow had a feeling that this tree-shaped three-dimensional talisman was indomitable. Indomitable? Thinking of this word, Luo Fan had already understood why he had such a strong impulse to devour this tree. His invisible cultivation method was obtained from the Buzhou Mountain, and his spirit was directly shaped into the shape of the Buzhou Mountain. Although strange changes had taken place at this time, the indomitable nature had not changed at all. This tree also contained such an indomitable nature, which made Luo Fan's spirit instinctively attracted to it, making his spirit extremely eager for this tree unconsciously. After carefully searching through his memory and the general knowledge he had obtained from the original spirit of Pan Gu, he was shocked. He had already found some clues about this tree. Chapter 152. The Three Poles of Heaven and Earth, the Buzhou Tree, the World Tree, and the Fusang Tree. According to the general knowledge left behind by Pangu's primordial spirit, the primordial world had three pillars that supported the heavens and the earth. They were distributed in the three poles of the primordial world. These three pillars supported the East Pole, the South Pole, and the Northwest Pole, where Luo Fan was currently. Compared to the vast size of the entire primordial world, Luo Fan, who was hundreds of millions of kilometers away from Buzhou Mountain, was still at the northwest pole of the primordial world. Among them, the one that supported the heavens and the earth was the Fusang Tree, also known as the Fusang Tree. In the legends of later generations, the sun and the moon hung on its branches. It was located on an extremely vast island in the East Ocean. Its branches were extremely huge and stretched straight into the sky. Its height was extremely shocking, and it supported the heavens and the earth. The supreme sky tree was in existence of the same level as the Fusang tree. It was located in the South Pole, somewhere in the depths of the South Ocean. As the pillar of the South Pole, it supported the entire southern world of the primordial world. Although the two of them were different from the Buzhou mountain that was formed by Panga's spine, their functions were similar. They both had the essence of supporting the heavens and the earth. If one of the three mysterious existences of Buzhou mountain, the supreme sky tree, and the Fusang tree broke, the sky would definitely tilt, and the earth would definitely fall. Why would a tree species of the supreme sky tree that is located in the South Pole appear here? Luo Fan recognized the supreme sky tree and could not help but be even more surprised. From the South Pole to the Northwest Pole, one had to cross the two poles of the entire primordial world. The distance between them was hundreds of millions of kilometers. Even if Luo Fan flew at full speed or even flew at the top speed of the Wuji Palace in the void, he might not be able to cross such a long distance even if he spent hundreds of years, and now, the seed of the supreme sky tree in the south was lying in his hands, allowing him to observe and comprehend it. It had even given a Khanate god from the extreme northwest a chance to step onto the path of the Tao. Such a strange thing was truly unbelievable. After thinking about it carefully for a long time, Luo Fan could not figure out why the seed of the supreme sky tree had appeared here more than a yuan hui. Knowing that there was not enough information, Luo Fan could not gain anything even if he continued to think. Instead, he focused his attention on the tree-shaped talisman in the center of the seed. Regarding three-dimensional talismans, Luo Fan was already very familiar with them. They were the foundation of his path. Not to mention the system of talismans he created with the help of Pan Gu's primordial spirit. Merely the system of talismans he obtained from the sun had already evolved the nature of talismans to a certain extreme. Therefore, when he saw the tree-shaped three-dimensional seal, he knew that a whole new world had opened up in front of him. This tree-shaped talisman represented a Tao star talisman system that was completely different from the two Tao star talisman systems he knew. As he comprehended this Tao star talisman, it gradually unfolded and flowed through his mind. It was similar to the Buzhou mountain talisman that had been transformed by his divine soul. Although this tree-shaped talisman was only a single three-dimensional talisman, it was all-encompassing and contained almost all the mysteries of the world. From it, one could distinguish endless types of talismans. Almost any kind of talisman with any function could be developed from this talisman. It could be said that this tree-shaped talisman was the root of this kind of talisman. Luo Fan tried his best to comprehend this tree-shaped talisman. From all angles, directions, and branches, he tried his best to find the root of this kind of three-dimensional talisman and the great Tao of the origin contained within it. He compared these great Tao of the origin with the Buzhou mountain in his divine soul, which had been transformed by his divine soul. This allowed him to have a deeper understanding of the Buzhou mountain, which had been transformed by his divine soul. With a comparison, it would be easier for him to discover its characteristics. As he gained a deeper understanding of the Buzhou mountain, which had been transformed by his divine soul, Luo Fan instinctively sensed that his divine soul seemed to have become more agile and condensed. It was as if his control over his divine soul had become smoother and smoother. Immersed in this comprehension, Ji Hao did not notice the passage of time at all. Unknowingly, Luo Fan had been sitting on this source of chaotic energy with his eyes closed for 36 years. Unbeknownst to him, Luo Fan's supernatural power had become as agile as a real living being. This did not hinder his control. Instead, it allowed him to control it more smoothly, more freely, and more like an extension of his arm. This, of course, did not mean that Luo Fan could not control his supernatural power smoothly in the past. If he could not control it as he pleased, it would be better to use his arm to control it. It only meant that his control of the supernatural power had improved tremendously compared to before. After all, there was no limit to the improvement of the power of control. The thought that there was a limit was only the limitation of knowledge. In addition, the number of the magical power units that had just increased to 388,800 seemed to be moving and growing again. In fact, all the conditions for the number of the magical power units to grow again had already been met. It was just that because the time since the last growth was too short, the degree of control was slightly insufficient, so there was no real growth. But it could be predicted that when he had enough control over the magical power, the growth of the magical power units would no longer be hindered. On this day, 36 years after he sat cross-legged and closed his eyes, the billions of grayish-brown rays of light emitted by the tree suddenly converged and disappeared without a trace. Following that, the magical power that contained Luo Fan's thoughts in the tree suddenly rushed out of the tree and directly entered Luo Fan's left palm. It returned to his body, and began to flow continuously in his meridians. At the same time, his body, which had not moved for a long time, suddenly trembled, and an incomparably terrifying suction force suddenly erupted. This suction force was completely targeted at the source of chaotic energy beneath him. Like a whale sucking in water, it continuously sucked the endless chaotic energy into his body. This source of chaotic energy was already an extremely large source of chaotic energy in the entire primordial world, but compared to Luo Fan's super-strong needs, it was still far from enough. He only spent 3 days to sweep away the source of chaotic energy that had not shown any signs of decreasing in the past 36 years, causing an irregular hole with a radius of 10,000 feet to appear in the depths of the cave. All the chaotic energy had been sucked into Luo Fan's body. It was twisted and dispersed by his magical power that was flowing endlessly, turning into a pure source of chaotic energy. Then, it was completely absorbed by his magical power units that were shaped like Buzhou Mountain, replenishing the internal emptiness caused by the progress of his magical power. This magical power was more active and agile than it was 36 years ago. After absorbing the entire source of chaotic energy, it seemed to be very full and substantial. His mind and will flowed through the Nameless Cultivation Method's mantra, and the magical power in his body circulated along its route for a total of 81 cycles before returning to his lower abdomen. It once again condensed into a mysterious earth, immortal Tao fruit that contained infinite power and endless mysteries. It stretched and shrank, trembled and jumped. It was like a strange fruit, but also like a heart filled with endless vitality. If one observed carefully, they would discover that the Earth Immortal Tao fruit was slightly larger than 36 years ago. The frequency of its contraction and vibration seemed to be more mysterious and profound than before. Luo Fan sensed the changes in the Earth Immortal Tao fruit slightly and enjoyed the aftertaste of the improvement of his cultivation realm. After a while, he slowly opened his eyes. His eyes flickered with golden and silver light as he looked at the seed of the supreme sky tree in his hand. Although he still could not see through the tree through his golden and silver eyes, the instinctive attraction of the tree had greatly reduced. There was no longer a strong urge to devour the tree in his soul. Knowing that this was because he had already understood the essence of the tree, Luo Fan was not surprised. He raised his right hand again and covered the tree. In an instant, countless extremely tiny three-dimensional talisman shadows appeared out of thin air. They were like silk threads weaving. In the blink of an eye, they formed a silk cocoon outside the tree, completely enveloping it. When this silken cocoon phantom took shape, a very strange attractive force appeared, and the vitality and wood chi that the tree was constantly emitting were instantly absorbed by this silken cocoon phantom. With the vitality and wood chi, the silken cocoon formed by the tiny talisman shadows gradually materialized. After a while, it formed a perfect seal. A seal that absorbed the energy released by the seed and sealed the seed instead. It didn't need any external energy and didn't need any external energy. If it were the Luo fan in the past, he would definitely not have been able to do such a mysterious step. The fact that he could do this meant that his understanding of the three-dimensional talisman of the Supreme Sky Tree had reached an extremely profound realm. He raised his hand and put the sealed tree into the universe in his sleeve. He did not plan to deal with the tree immediately. To the primordial world's concept of time, it was too hasty to deal with it now. In 36 years, Bao Er's pure yang body should have been perfected. Luo Fan's heart suddenly stirred as he thought to himself. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, a mysterious connection came from afar and directly connected to his mind and will. In an instant, the scene of Luo Fu's family of three kneeling in front of a square table and praying appeared in Luo Fan's mind. Bao Er, who looked 12 or 13 years old, was kneeling there. Her body flickered with a mysterious red glow that was tens of thousands of feet long. It was extremely eye-catching. This red glow was the sign of Bao Er's pure yang body being perfected. Child prays to father, begs father to show his spirit. Disciple Guang Pu prays to Shizuan, begs Shizuan to show his spirit. Following these scenes, there were still these nondescript prayers. However, this time, there was Bao Er's clear prayer. Bao Er, please show me your spirit. Grandpa Luo Fan shifted his attention and knew that the family of three was still at the place where he had seen them last time. However, they were still facing the natural array formation. Clearly, although 36 years had passed, Guang Pu was still unable to break through the natural array formation and enter the valley. You know that you should take this opportunity to comprehend the Tao of array formations. Your reaction is quite agile. Luo Fan glanced at Guang Pu and knew why Guang Pu had not broken through the natural array formation after 36 years. Chapter 153. Transforming into the Nine Heavens, enjoying family. Previously, Luo Fu and Guang Pu had suddenly discovered the red light emitting from Bao Er's body. They recalled what Luo Fan had said before he left decades ago. They knew that it was the manifestation of Bao Er's pure yang body, so they had set up an incense table and prayed to Luo Fan. At this moment, when they suddenly saw Luo Fan's illusory body materialize in front of them, they could not help but show extreme joy on their faces. Father, long live! Although Luo Fu managed to maintain a steady appearance, his slightly trembling voice did not sound like that of a father. Instead, he sounded like a child like before. Naturally, Guang Pu could not treat Luo Fan as casually as Luo Fu. When she saw Luo Fan's figure appear, she hurriedly bowed and said, "Greetings, Master. Long live Master." Grandpa? In addition to the two of them, Bao Er also had some reaction. She looked at Luo Fan with clear and somewhat doubtful eyes and directly said these two words, completely revealing her somewhat doubtful and somewhat expectant mood. When Luo Fan saw the performance of the three of them, he could not help but feel a very warm feeling in his heart. This was because the performance of Luo Fu and the other two made him understand that he was not alone in the untainted world. He had family and disciples. Why are you so polite? Get up. Luo Fan smiled. The illusory body condensed from incense took a step in the void and arrived beside the three of them. He raised his hand and produced an invisible force to help the three of them up. With a turn of his eyes, his golden and silver pupils flashed. He had already clearly seen the cultivation progress of Luo Fu and Guang Pu over the past few decades. However, there was nothing much to say in the end. 36 years was far too short compared to the thousands of years of cultivation they had gone through. In these 36 years, they were only at the stage of accumulation. Although he could see their cultivation progress little by little, it did not surprise him. At this moment, Bao Er looked like he was already 12 or 13 years old. Naturally, Luo Fan did not carry him like last time. Although he could still do it, it did not look very good. He raised his hand and gently waved. The bright moon-shaped talisman that was imprinted on Baur's back, which indicated the growth state of the pure yang body, suddenly appeared. In an instant it left his back. With a soft poof, it exploded and dissolved into the boundless innate yuan qi around him. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared without a trace. As the bright moon-shaped talisman left the body, Baur's body emitted a bright red glow that only Luo Fan and his wife could see. Abruptly, a bright red glow suddenly converged and completely disappeared. In the eyes of the three of them, the bright red glow was obvious. However, in Baur's eyes, the red glow did not exist at all. At this moment, the red glow had converged, but he only felt that his body seemed to be slightly different. He looked around curiously but did not notice anything unusual. Thus, he threw this change to the back of his mind and turned to look at Luo Fan curiously. Luo Fan could not help but laugh when he saw Baur's clear and curious eyes. He raised his hand and rubbed Baur's head. Although he did not say anything, the closeness was evident in his words. Feeling the incomparably familiar and intimate aura from Luo Fan, Baur could not help but close his eyes comfortably. His face showed a relieved and joyful expression. Baur's pure yang body has indeed grown to perfection. It is indeed time for you to cultivate. Luo Fan smiled and raised his head to speak to Luo Fu and Guang Pu. Hearing Luo Fan's words, Luo Fu and Guang Pu could not help but smile in pleasant surprise. It was obvious that they were very happy that Baur's pure yang body had been confirmed by Luo Fan. Then what are we waiting for, father? Baur has not cultivated yet. He is waiting for your cultivation method to cultivate. Luo Fu would not be courteous with Luo Fan and said directly. Guang Pu was like a little wife at the side. Although she didn't say anything, the look of anticipation in her eyes clearly expressed her intentions. Luo Fan smiled and did not keep them in suspense. He raised his hand and pointed. A speck of spiritual light rushed out from his hand. In an instant, it produced a terrifying suction force that engulfed the surroundings, absorbing and condensing the boundless innate vitality. In a breath's time, it wrapped around the spiritual light and formed a jade archive. This cultivation method is called the Nine Heavens Yang Transformation Technique. It is a cultivation method that reverses the acquired Tao fruit. It will allow Baur to attain the innate pure yang body and finally attain the earth immortal Tao fruit. Luo Fan raised his hand and shook the jade archive. The jade archive landed in Luo Fu's hand. Baur did not have any cultivation foundation. Naturally, this cultivation method had to be handed over to his guardian. It was impossible for him to directly cultivate it. Luo Fu took the jade archive and felt a warmth in his hand. It was as if it was made from real warm jade. However, it emanated a supernatural power similar to that of creation. It was quite extraordinary. However, in Luo Fu's heart, Luo Fan was an omnipotent existence. This supernatural power that was similar to that of creation could not faze him in the slightest. Luo Fu raised his hand and unfurled the jade archive. In an instant, countless complex and abstruse characters and incomparably complex diagrams floated out of the jade archive. They flickered and changed continuously in front of him, repeating themselves over and over. It was displaying the Nine Heavens Yang Transformation Technique again and again in a very special way. It was as if he was using some kind of special method to explain this cultivation method, allowing the audience to understand this cultivation method more easily and freely. Luo Fu had cultivated the Dantian soul sculpting technique before. He was naturally very familiar with the cultivation method of reversing the acquired vitality and returning to the innate vitality. Therefore, he only needed to read through this cultivation method once to know that it was no less profound than the Dantian soul sculpting technique. Even its cultivation level was the same as the Dantian soul sculpting technique. It was also divided into 6 realms: Qi refining, core formation, divine fire, return to antecedents, adversity crossing, and earth immortal. As he carefully savored this cultivation method, Luo Fu was overjoyed. This cultivation method was created based on Bao'er's body. It was incomparably compatible with Bao'er's physique. It could definitely bring out the full advantage of Bao'er's pure yang body. It could be predicted that if Bao'er cultivated this cultivation method, not only would his cultivation speed be unimaginably fast, the obstacles he would face in breaking through to the next realm would also be much smaller than what he had encountered before. Bao'er, hurry up and thank grandfather. Luo Fu was overjoyed and hurriedly scolded Bao'er. Oh, thank you, Grandpa, Bao'er said obediently. Although he was only 12 or 13 years old, he had lived for decades after all. Although he was not very mature, he was still sensible. He knew that something that could make his father so excited must be something that would bring him endless benefit. Luo Fan smiled and patted Bao'er's head. Suddenly, he felt a little strange. It seemed that this virtual body was much more condensed than the last time. He could not help but turn around to look at the incense burner. When he saw it, he could not help but laugh. Perhaps it was because of the lesson learned from the last prayer. The 3 incense sticks that Luo Fu made this time were 4 to 5 times bigger than the last time, and even 3 to 4 times longer. After the 3 incense sticks were lit, the gray incense sticks continuously rolled out like 3 chimneys. When Luo Fu saw Luo Fan's expression, he knew that his little thoughts had been discovered by Luo Fan. He could not help but be a little embarrassed and said, I have a lot of questions to ask father, so. Luo Fan shook his head and smiled like an ordinary father facing his own children. Using this method to prolong the time is not a bad idea. Come on, don't tell me that we have become estranged after not seeing each other for a few years. When Luo Fu heard this, he was overjoyed. He led Luo Fan's virtual body to a stone table and a stone bench at the side and sat down. After more than 30 years of management, this hillside, which used to only have a few straw huts, had become a rather complete and beautiful manor. This time, Luo Fan did not immediately ask Luo Fu and Guang Pu about their cultivation. Instead, they chatted leisurely like 3 generations of grandparents and grandchildren. They talked about Luo Fu and the others' experiences in these years, talked about all kinds of dangers they had encountered, and talked about all kinds of interesting things they had encountered. This was almost an unprecedented chat. It made Luo Fu gradually recover the unscrupulous and intimate attitude he had with Luo Fan when he was young. Although his behavior was slightly different due to his mature mentality, it also made Guang Pu gradually lose her restraint in front of Luo Fan. For Bao'er, this allowed him to gradually familiarize himself with Luo Fan, his grandfather, whom he had only met once. Unknowingly, his closeness to Luo Fan had surpassed his closeness to Luo Fu. Although Luo Fan did not say much about himself, listening to Guang Pu and Luo Fu talking about the things he had learned from the memory of Zhifang Tongzi, he felt extremely relaxed. His heart, which was always tense because of his obsession with cultivation, also became much more relaxed. After all, this virtual body of Luo Fan was condensed by incense. No matter how big and long the 3 incense sticks were, they could not last for too long. After half a day, Luo Fan suddenly felt that his virtual body had become a little weak. With a slight movement of his mind, he knew what was going on. He could not help but sigh and said, The 3 incense sticks are about to burn out. You need to cultivate well and must not slack off. Also, this 9 Heaven Sun transformation technique is somewhat similar to the Essence Dan spirit shaping technique. Fuer, you need to study it carefully and then give it to Bao'er. Hearing Luo Fan's words, Luo Fu and the others woke up from the state of being immersed in the peaceful atmosphere. Looking back, they found that the 3 incense sticks were really only a little spark left and could almost be extinguished at any time. Knowing that Luo Fan was about to leave, they could not help but feel very reluctant. Luo Fu nodded and said, Dad, don't worry. I will study it carefully and will not let Bauer take any detours. Disciple will definitely cultivate seriously, Guang Pu said from the side. Grandpa, are you leaving? Bauer understood what the three of them said and could not help but feel a little reluctant. Yes, Grandpa is leaving. Bauer should practice hard in the future and learn the great divine sense as soon as possible. Luo Fan smiled slightly and raised his hand to touch Bauer's head. Bauer nodded reluctantly and said, Grandpa, don't worry. I will definitely surpass Dad. Ha ha! Luo Fan could not help laughing when he heard this. Then, the illusory body formed by the Joss flames suddenly dispersed. Chapter 154. Guang Pu flies to the moon, pure yang aspiration during the time that Luo Fan had spent with Luo Fu and the others. Whether it was Luo Fan or Luo Fu and Guo Pu, none of them mentioned the valley in front of them. They didn't ask Luo Fan to break the natural array formation for them. It was as if the valley was very ordinary and there was almost nothing unusual about it. Luo Fan didn't mention it because he wanted to give them a test. He wanted them to use their own cultivation base and their own cultivation base to see through the truth and break the array formation. That way they would be able to obtain endless benefits in the process. It would be much better than if Luo Fan directly opened the way for them and brought them the chaotic spiritual route. Moreover, it could also increase their knowledge and improve their development in the field of formations. At least, after so many years, Guang Pu, who had just entered the field of formations, was already able to create many formations that Luo Fan had never taught him. Although their power was only ordinary, the trend was extremely good. As for Luo Fu and the others not mentioning it, it was very simple. It was because Luo Fan didn't want to mention it after the virtual body formed by the incense dispersed. Luo Fan's consciousness returned to the cave that was hundreds of millions of miles away from Luo Fu and the others through some mysterious connection. It returned to his body. His body shook slightly. Luo Fan slowly opened his eyes that were flashing with gold and silver light. Because he had enjoyed half a day of family love, his mood was very relaxed. He even felt that his cultivation state was better than ever. After a while, he raised his hand and waved. The void Wuji Palace suddenly rushed out of his sea of consciousness. In the blink of an eye, it was already in front of him. With a turn, it became thousands of feet tall. In an instant, it filled the gap in the depths of the cave because the chaotic spiritual root was sucked out. Luo Fan didn't stay any longer. He stood up and took a step forward, entering the minor kiliacosm inside the limitless palace. He appeared directly on the platform in the middle of the lightning pool. He had already made a breakthrough in his cultivation realm. However, due to the lack of maturity and accumulation, his strength was limited to his current realm. This was also the reason why he was unable to obtain a true breakthrough. Therefore, what Luo Fan needed to do now was to cultivate painstakingly for a long period of time and finally achieve sufficient attainment in his cultivation so that his strength could make real progress. Luo Fan came to the platform. In just an instant, the changes in the limitless void palace's minor kiliacosm over the years flowed through his mind. In the blink of an eye, he had a complete grasp of the development of this minor kiliacosm. It was still a martial civilization, and although it hadn't grown much, its energy arts and consummate skills weren't as lacking as they had been in the past. In fact, there were as many of them as carps in a river, and they could be seen in the fighting. After comprehending the development of this civilization, Luo Fan seemed to have understood something. After a long time, he moved his mind. The almost endless chaotic chi in the minor kiliacosm began to gather toward the platform, causing the density of the chaotic chi on the platform to increase. In just a short while, the primordial chaos energy on the platform was no less than an ordinary primordial chaos energy source. Although it was still a lot worse than the top of Buzhou Mountain, it was better in that it was endless. It was better in that it never stopped. Luo Fan, wrapped in the chaotic chi, slowly closed his eyes. The earthly immortal's Tao fruit in his body suddenly collapsed and turned into a magical power. It began to circulate in his body according to a mysterious and inexplicable path. In his mind there was also a mysterious and unfathomable mantra that flowed through, causing his mind to be in a mysterious state of trance. The combination of the mantra and the path produced all kinds of extremely mysterious and amazing results, causing Luo Fan's body to gradually emit a mysterious aura that was difficult to guess. With the appearance of this mysterious aura, Luo Fan was like a supreme god that suppressed the past, present, and future. He was completely integrated with the platform, the Thunderbolt Pool, the entire Dangling Peak Hall, the entire Sacred Mountain, the entire continent, and the entire minor Kiliacosm. He was the world, and the world was him. The entire minor Kiliacosm gradually produced all kinds of mysterious changes with this change. Somewhere on the continent, a 4 or 5-year-old child, who was looking for food in the mountains, suddenly trembled. He suddenly felt an indescribable sense of fullness. He abruptly straightened his body and looked toward the center of the continent. There was a kind of expectation and confusion in his eyes that even he could not understand. This child was the combination of the fragment of Luo Fan's divine soul and the inextinguishable divine light, who had reincarnated countless times. "What on earth is this? It's so comfortable, so peaceful," the child murmured. After a long time, his stomach kept growling, which pulled him back from this strange state and made him return to the process of looking for food. However, his movements seemed to be more agile and free than before. The reason for such a change was naturally because Luo Fan was cultivating on the platform, because Luo Fan's original body had a very mysterious, unpredictable, and incomparably wonderful connection with him. This caused the existence of Luo Fan and Luo Fan's aura to stimulate the mysterious ability that came from Luo Fan's divine soul, but after countless reincarnations, it was enough to make him stronger and make his cultivation path smoother. Time passed. In the blink of an eye, more than 3,600 years had passed in this minor Kiliacosm. Even in the untainted land outside, this period of time was nearly 10 years. On this day, Luo Fan suddenly had a whim and abruptly woke up from the trance state of cultivation. Instinctively, he pinched his fingers to calculate and knew the reason. He couldn't help but sigh with a somewhat complicated expression. Although it's a bit sloppy, it barely meets the requirements. Such a thought instantly flashed through his mind. Just now, when he pinched his fingers to calculate, he already knew the reason why he had a whim. It was because Guang Pu had finally broken through the natural formation and used the method he taught her to absorb the poplar-shaped chaotic spiritual root into her body, thus triggering the message he had left in the chaotic spiritual root. With the help of Zhifeng Boy's eyes, he had already seen Guang Pu's choice. Although Guang Pu was very reluctant and cried for a while hugging Bao, she still chose to go straight to the 9th heaven and the moon to get the opportunity on the moon that was mentioned in the message. After Guang Pu decided to go to the moon, although Luo Fu was very reluctant, he knew that this was the best choice for Guang Pu, so he didn't urge her to stay. Instead, he helped Guang Pu to persuade Bao, and his persuasion also made Bao gradually understand the helplessness and cruelty of the untainted land. In this world, although there were countless excellent and even outstanding cultivation conditions, and even any living creature only needed a little bit of consciousness to obtain super great magical power and great ability through hard work, it was also because of this that the untainted land almost predictably developed in the direction of chaos. In the future, the untainted land would definitely become extremely cruel and chaotic. His persuasion also made Bao gradually understand the helplessness and cruelty of the untainted land. If they grew up before most of the other living beings gained great abilities, they would not be able to gain the power to protect themselves. Then, what awaited them would be being killed by other living beings, devoured by other living beings, and turned into a stepping stone for other living beings to improve themselves. and this persuasion also completely revealed what Luo Fu knew but did not dare to think about. Thus, Luo Fu's desire to seek Tao was even more determined, and finally completely confirmed his goal. It could be said that the consequences of Guang Pu's decision were quite gratifying. Guang Pu hugged Bao and carefully encouraged her to cultivate well before hugging Luo Fu again. Then, she turned around. Her body turned into a long silver rainbow and rushed straight to the sky. She directly embarked on the journey to the moon. I didn't expect there to be an unexpected gain. With this stimulation, the two of them should know to cultivate seriously. Luo Fan felt the change in Luo Fu and Bao Er's minds with the help of Zhifeng Boy. He was slightly happy. "Son, from now on, you and I will depend on each other." Luo Fu looked at the silver rainbow that gradually disappeared into the distance. He collected his emotions and reluctantly said to Bao, "When will Mother come back? I already miss her." Bao looked at the sky and asked, "Maybe 1 or 2 days, maybe 1 or 2 years, maybe a few decades, maybe a few hundred years, or even a few thousand years. But she will always come back. As long as you cultivate well, you will be able to wait for her to come back," Luo Fu said with a sigh. "Oh, then I've decided. I must cultivate well and reach the crossing disaster realm as soon as possible. By then, I can also go to the moon and find Mother myself," Bao suddenly said with determination. Crossing disaster realm. When Luo Fu heard these words, he was slightly stunned. He smiled bitterly in his heart, but he didn't say anything. He just patted Bao head. His cultivation was not strong enough, so it was completely understandable that he didn't know the difficulty of cultivation. The crossing disaster realm was a realm where one had already reached the earth immortal realm. It was a realm where one's inner strength was constantly transforming into spiritual power. Stepping into this realm meant that the cultivator's cultivation was about to be completed. It meant that the cultivator was about to achieve the Tao. Now, even Luo Fu, who had cultivated for more than a yuanhui, was only at the divine fire realm, which was 2 realms lower than the crossing disaster realm. No matter how talented Bao was, it would take at least several yuanhui, or even dozens of yuanhui, for her to reach the crossing disaster realm. By that time, Guang Pu would have already achieved the earth immortal realm and returned. Why would she still need you to look for her? Of course, Luo Fu couldn't directly say such words that would dampen his enthusiasm. Then you have to work hard. You have just entered the Qi refinement realm. If you want to reach the crossing disaster realm as soon as possible, you can't be lazy anymore. Luo Fu encouraged him. At this time, the two of them were in the valley where the white poplar spiritual root was. There was a natural array here, and there was also the presence of rich Qi of chaos. It was an excellent place to settle down and cultivate. Therefore, after observing for a while, Luo Fu decided to settle down here and cultivate. It would be best if he could break through the divine fire realm and reach the returning nature realm as soon as possible. Moving was not a problem for Luo Fu. Although he was only at the divine fire realm, compared to Luo Fan, Hongjun, and Guang Pu, his cultivation and realm were really not enough. Chapter 155. For elemental Tao fruit. With Luo Fu's continuous use of his mountain-moving and sea-draining powers, the manor that his family of 3 had been managing for decades across the valley was moved into the valley in no time at all. After it was rearranged according to the original layout of the manor, and under the illumination of the thick primordial Qi of chaos, the valley looked even more like a fairyland. Bao had long been aware of Luo Fu's abilities, and even thought that his father was an omnipotent being. But when he saw that his normally amiable father had the ability to move mountains and sea-draining seas, he could not help but gape and stare blankly. Seeing Bao's expression, Luo Fu knew that this was a great opportunity, so he took the opportunity to encourage him. Bao, if you practice hard, when you break through to the Qi refinement stage and form the core, you will be able to do the same thing easily. Really? Then I'll go into seclusion immediately. I won't come out until I form the core. Bao Er's eyes lit up when he heard this, and he immediately shouted. There's no need to be so anxious. You need to know that more haste, less speed. Just do as you normally do. That way your progress will be faster. Hearing this, Luo Fu hurriedly stopped him. It should be known that Bao Er was only at the beginning of the qi refinement stage. According to Luo Fu's own speed, by the time he broke through to the primal core stage, thousands of years would have passed, and according to Bao Er's current level of cultivation, if he were to go into seclusion for thousands of years, even if he did not go crazy, his state of mind would be greatly damaged. Oh! Bao Er's eyes flashed with doubt as he responded somewhat unwillingly. He still had a lot of faith in his father's authority. Therefore, although he felt that going into seclusion would be better, he did not continue to insist. Instead, he chose to listen to Luo Fu. At this time, within the spirit space of the Wuji Palace, Luo Fan was looking at Luo Fu and the others' various choices through the eyes of the Jifeng boy. Seeing this, he was quite satisfied with Luo Fu. Luo Fu's choice could be said to be the best choice for him at the moment. It was also the choice that was most beneficial to the cultivation of the father and son. Although it had only been over 100 years since Luo Fu had left Buzhou Mountain, he had experienced a lot during this time. The impact of these magnificent experiences on Luo Fu's mind was even greater than that of the Pali meeting on Buzhou Mountain. The effects of this training were rather obvious, and they had long achieved the goal of training. In other words, what Luo Fu needed now was no longer experience. He needed to meditate and cultivate. He needed to convert the experience he gained into his own cultivation, into the realm of the Tao. Knowing that there was a change in the situation, Luo Fan's mind moved slightly. The Jifeng seal hidden in the void nearby turned into the appearance of a steady and mature young man. With one step, he passed through the natural array as if passing through a layer of air, and entered the valley full of endless chaotic qi. At this time, Luo Fu was arranging Bao Er's cultivation position. Suddenly, he felt that the natural array that had become one with his mind moved, as if something had passed through the natural array. He couldn't help but be shocked. Turning his head, he saw a steady and mature young man floating in the void 30 feet above the ground. At this time, the young man was looking at him with a calm and indifferent gaze. This person is very strong. Stronger than me. In an instant, an instinctive thought appeared in Luo Fu's mind. Then, a beam of white light shot out from his body with a schwa sound. Then, it suddenly condensed beside him, and condensed into an awe-inspiring white tiger that was 100 feet in size. The tiger crouched on the ground and arched its back. It seemed as if it was about to pounce. Just as Luo Fu made such a decisive action, there were two mysterious rays of light emitted from the steady young man's eyes. In an instant, it condensed into a human figure in front of Luo Fu. That figure, vividly, was the appearance of his father, Luo Fan, whom Luo Fu was most familiar with. Fu this is a magic treasure that father has refined, called the Jifeng seal. The young man you see is the treasure spirit of the Jifeng seal. His name is Jifeng boy. When father is not by your side, if you have any questions about cultivation, you can ask him. I'm sure you will get an answer. The figure opened its mouth and Luo Fan's words came out. When Luo Fu heard this, there was a look of surprise in his eyes. Naturally, Luo Fu knew what a magic treasure was. He had also seen the Wuji Palace and the Wuji boy in the Wuji Palace. Naturally, he knew how terrifying the power of a magic treasure was. Although he didn't know when Luo Fan obtained such a Jifeng seal, he knew that this magic treasure would provide him with guidance on cultivation. How could he not be happy? Thank you, father. Luo Fu quickly thanked him. Luo Fan nodded slightly. In the blink of an eye, the figure disappeared without a trace. At this time, Jifeng boy had already landed in front of Luo Fu. Seeing that Luo Fan's figure disappeared, he bowed slightly and said, Jifeng greets young master. Luo Fu knew that he would need Jifeng boy to answer any questions in the future. How could he dare to be arrogant? He quickly went up to help him up and said, "Uncle Jifeng, aren't you underestimating Luo Fu? Uncle Jifeng is Dad's magic treasure, so he is Luo Fu's elder. How could Luo Fu dare to accept an uncle's greeting? Absolutely not, absolutely not. Jifeng doesn't dare to accept the title of uncle, young master," Jifeng boy said lightly. This time, Luo Fu didn't care about Jifeng boy's request. He still called Uncle Jifeng. He even called Bao over to greet him and asked her to call him Grandpa Jifeng. From Luo Fan's previous words, Bao still knew what kind of treasure spirit Jifeng boy was. She didn't have much objection to calling Jifeng boy or Grandpa Jifeng. She went up to greet him and stared at Jifeng boy with clear and curious eyes. After Luo Fan left a bit of his will inside the Jifeng seal, he sent Jifeng boy into the natural array. After that, he didn't care about what happened on the other side. At this time, Luo Fu had settled down and didn't need to travel to increase his knowledge for the time being, so there was no longer a need for Jifeng boy to hide and protect him. It was better to let Jifeng boy show himself. In this way, not only could he protect the father and son, but he could also use Jifeng boy's wisdom to solve some problems in cultivation for Luo Fu. After all, Jifeng boy was a magic treasure spirit. Although he couldn't compare to Luo Fan, who had attained the Earth Immortal realm, he was somewhat similar to Luo Fan to some extent. Solving the problem of the Divine Fire realm was extremely easy for Jifeng boy. It was because of these considerations that the previous change happened. As for how they would get along after they met, how could Luo Fan waste his time to understand such a small detail? After his will returned to his body, his mind moved slightly, and he once again fell into cultivation. During the previous 3,600 years of cultivation, Luo Fan's cultivation realm and strength had improved a lot. The Dharma power units in his body had also increased a lot with this improvement. It had increased by nearly 50,000, reaching 430,000. However, he was not satisfied because he still felt that he had more power. There was still a lot of room for improvement in the number of these Dharma power units. In fact, this cultivation was also the first time he saw the number of Dharma power units increase one after another. It was the first time he saw these Dharma power units being produced one after another. This feeling was really quite wonderful. It allowed him to have a deeper understanding of the characteristics of these Dharma power unit. At the same time, he felt that his control over the Dharma power units had reached a whole new level, and the power that he could exert from the Dharma power units had increased a lot. This feeling made him quite addicted. At this time, since he felt that he had another chance to improve, he naturally wouldn't hesitate. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, another 10,000 years had passed. For the untainted world, nearly another 30 years had passed. On this day, in the spirit space of the Wuji Palace, he was sitting cross-legged and operating the Dharma power in his body, making it flow continuously according to the route of the nameless skill. In his mind and will, the nameless skill's mantra flowed continuously. All of a sudden, Luo Fan's body shook. A mysterious, desolate, and unyielding aura that contained an incomparably tenacious will surged out from his body. In an instant, it covered the entire Danglin Peak Hall and rapidly spread in all directions. In the blink of an eye, it covered the entire vast continent with a radius of millions of miles. In the instant that they were enveloped by this mysterious aura, all of the living beings on the continent felt an extremely strange feeling emerge from the depths of their hearts. This feeling made practically every single one of them faintly feel that there was an unparalleled existence in the sky, looking down on their every move as if they were ants. With the appearance of this aura, Luo Fan's body suddenly shook. Immediately, three-dimensional talismans in the shape of Buzhou Mountain surged out of his body one after another. They piled up around him and danced in the air, decorating the sky above the thunderbolt pool into an incomparably mysterious and gorgeous world. 518,400. This was the number of three-dimensional talismans. After more than 13,600 years of cultivation, Luo Fan had completely transformed what he had gained from traveling around the sun and the moon into his own cultivation. The Dharma power in his body was also 1/3 more than before. The number of Dharma power units had also increased by 1 yuan, reaching 4 yuan. Although these Dharma power units were still a little empty, and were still like empty shells, they had already laid a good foundation. As long as he filled them up, his cultivation would increase by several times. It could be said that at this moment, he was one step closer to breaking through the realm of true immortality and becoming a golden immortal. Luo Fan opened his eyes and stared at the more than 500,000 three-dimensional talismans waving in the air with his pupils, which were flickering with golden and silver light. A satisfied smile gradually appeared on his face. However, this smile only appeared for a moment before it suddenly froze. "I didn't expect that there would be such a day." He sighed slightly. With a thought, the 518,400 three-dimensional talismans above him spun and rushed back into his body. They once again condensed into an earthly immortal's Tao fruit in his lower abdomen. Just now, the reason why the satisfied smile on Luo Fan's face disappeared was because he suddenly felt that someone was climbing this towering mountain, which was called the Holy Mountain by the inhabitants of the continent. Chapter 156. Fragmented Peak, Divine Rahu. By the time Luo Fan had sensed it, this person had already climbed to the middle of the mountain, which was thousands of feet above the ground. This height was already a height that no one had ever been able to reach since ancient times. It's this feeling again. There must be no mistake. The person who is secretly controlling me must be on the sacred mountain. Just as Luo Fan's body emitted that aura, this person muttered to himself, and his expression became somewhat stern. This person was a middle-aged man, and his appearance was somewhat similar to Luo Fan's. He had a medium build, and there was nothing special about his appearance. However, the surging power within his body had already reached an extremely shocking level, and it was not any weaker than Lin Tiannan's after he had broken through the void. Looking at this person's movements, it seemed that he was very familiar with this sacred mountain, and his movements were very skillful. Step by step, the formation that enveloped the mountain seemed to have no effect on him, and he easily bypassed it. At this moment, he had already cultivated to the peak of martial arts that could be reached in this small thousand world. Every raise of his hand and every movement contained endless martial arts mysteries. This simple process of climbing up was like a demonstration of an exquisite and mysterious martial art in his hands. If his climbing posture was seen by martial artists, it would be enough to evolve hundreds of exquisite martial arts that would be enough for martial artists to fight to the death for. Even so, he did not know the mysteries of the formation, and he was only able to break through it by relying on a martial artist's extremely strong instinct for danger. Therefore, his speed of advancement was extremely slow. Although it seemed that he was constantly advancing, he could only advance 10 feet after several hours. Luo Fan's mind slightly moved, and with a void teleportation, his figure had already arrived in the sky above Dang Lingju Palace. Looking down, the great sun golden eyes and bright moon silver eyes had already covered this person. At this moment, the distance of 10,000 feet was almost like face to face, and the power of his golden eyes and silver eyes naturally did not weaken in the slightest. With just a glance, Luo Fan had already clearly seen this person's cultivation method, cultivation achievements, and physical state. How could that be? He has actually lived for more than 13,000 years, and has even cultivated to the peak of the void-shattering realm. That cultivation technique can even advance to the spirit-gathering realm. How is this possible? After seeing clearly, Luo Fan could not help but be extremely shocked. The purpose of this divine soul and the innate inextinguishable divine aura reincarnating was to borrow the power of reincarnation. The more they reincarnated, the better it would be. Thus, he had originally calculated that this fusion body would be able to easily cultivate extremely powerful martial arts, but its lifespan would not exceed 100 years. Even if he could reach 100 years of age in the midst of endless battles, he would still die a natural death. But now this person was already over 13,000 years old, an entire 130 times more than what he'd calculated. How could he not be shocked? The golden light and the silver light in his eyes flickered violently. In the blink of an eye, from the outside to the inside, a deeper secret that even he himself didn't know flowed through Luo Fan's mind. I see. After seeing it clearly, Luo Fan could not help but smile bitterly. At the end of the day, it turned out that this was the cause that he had sown more than 13,000 years ago. This person was impressively the child whose hidden ability was stimulated by Luo Fan's aura when he entered this many-thousand world to cultivate more than 13,000 years ago. It was unknown how many reincarnations he had combined with his body. I didn't expect there to be such a change. My aura actually swept away my original plan. Luo Fan smiled bitterly. With a wave of his hand, the formation that covered the entire mountain underwent an extremely subtle change. In front of the person, a path that extended to the top of the mountain appeared. Huh! The person suddenly discovered this change, and could not help but be surprised. He simply did not know what Luo Fan, who he regarded as his mortal enemy, was thinking. He stopped in front of the path for a long time and did not dare to take a step forward. After a long while, as if he had clearly considered the pros and cons, he gritted his teeth and used both his hands and feet to rush up the path that had suddenly appeared. His speed was many times faster than before. With a smooth path, from where he was to the top of the mountain, it was only a distance of less than 10,000 feet. For him, who had the power equivalent to breaking through the void, this distance was really too short. It only took less than an hour for this person to arrive at the top of the mountain and stand in front of the top of the mountain. When he stood in front of this palace, the moment the 15 large words, Creation Bell Divine Beauty, Yin and Yang Divide Dusk, and the top of the mountain above were imprinted in his eyes, he was stunned. These 10 words were written by Luo Fan after attaining the earthly immortal realm, and contained a trace of Luo Fan's comprehension and understanding of the Great Way. And this, for the person who had a complicated relationship with Luo Fan, was the best teaching material. Looking at these 15 words really had an indescribable effect on him. How about this top of the mountain? Is it pleasing to your eyes? At this moment, a clear voice came into this person's ears, instantly waking him up from that inexplicable state of comprehension. This voice was mysterious to the limit of this person's imagination. It seemed to contain the infinite great way between heaven and earth, as if there was infinite great way of martial arts contained in every change of tone. As soon as this person heard this voice, he suddenly felt that all the various martial arts he had painstakingly created in the past tens of thousands of years were simply rubbish, and could not compare to the martial arts contained in this voice. Who? However, after all, his mind was tough and difficult to change. In the blink of an eye, he came to his senses, shouted loudly, looked around, and saw Luo Fan standing behind him. In an instant, he was stunned again. Luo Fan's body was the most authentic born Taoism body, the most suitable body for cultivation in the world, and naturally contained the great way of Pangu. This person's perception was quite keen. As soon as he saw this body, he knew that visualizing this body would bring him countless benefits, so he instinctively fell into a state of visualization. I am you. Luo Fan smiled slightly. Nonsense. Who the hell are you? The person was startled by Luo Fan's words and woke up from that instinctive visualization. Without thinking about anything else, he shouted directly. Ha ha! Luo Fan smiled faintly, just looked at him, but did not say a word. This person looked at Luo Fan with a stern expression, but his face gradually showed confusion. This was because he seemed to be able to feel an aura that he was very familiar with from Luo Fan's body, yet it was also very frightening. "I am you. Can't you feel it?" Luo Fan repeated with a faint smile. "I am Luo Ho. I am definitely not you." The person's expression turned cold as he said, "Of course you are not me, but I am you." Luo Fan continued to say these confusing words, but the meaning was quite profound. However, there was also a little doubt in his heart. Luo Ho, is this name a coincidence, or has it been subconsciously influenced by my memories? Luo Ho lowered his head in silence for a long time. Suddenly, his eyes flashed and he roared, "I don't believe it!" Then, he stamped his right foot on the ground, creating a huge force. His body was like an eagle hunting its prey as he pounced towards Luo Fan. At the same time, the Zhen Qi on his body seemed to be boiling, transforming into a raging flame that wrapped around his entire body. The primal energy within a radius of 3 feet around him, under the guidance of a very strange mechanism, continued to gather and compress in his hands. By the time he arrived in front of Luo Fan, a watermelon-sized primal energy ball had already formed between his hands. Luo Ho's pounce was like the origin of all pounces in the world, and the martial arts contained within it were profound to an unimaginable level. There were more than 360 variations in the air, completely sealing off any of Luo Fan's escape route. It seemed as if Luo Fan could only take on this watermelon-sized ball of chaotic qi. But this ball of chaotic qi was extremely unstable, and there were black spatial cracks all around it, like black threads dancing in the air. Unexpectedly, through some kind of exquisite and mysterious gathering method, the chaotic qi was in an extremely unstable state, and then exploded with enough power to shatter the void. Luo Fan's great sun golden eyes and bright moon silver eyes had already seen through the mysteries of this ball of chaotic qi. He knew that this ball of chaotic qi contained some of the foundation of talismans that Luo Ho had comprehended over tens of thousands of years, and could draw support from the laws of this lesser chiliocosm to strengthen its attack power. He also knew that this ball of chaotic qi was enough to turn a 1,000-meter-tall mountain into powder. This level of attack, in this lesser chiliocosm, could absolutely be regarded as an invincible attack. Even if Luo Fu, who was in the divine fire realm, faced with this kind of attack, if he was not careful, he would probably have to pay half of his life to block it. It could be said that with just this one move, it was completely clear that Luo Ho had already exerted the martial arts cultivation of the void-breaking realm to the limit. It had even exceeded the limit. But unfortunately, the one he was facing was Luo Fan, the Luo Fan who had opened up this lesser chiliocosm. Even if Luo Fan wanted to dodge, with his proficiency in martial arts, he could easily do so. But Luo Fan did not do so at all. He just gently raised his hand to grab the ball of chaotic qi. In an instant, he crossed the void and directly touched the ball of chaotic qi. A light sound suddenly rang out. The ball of chaotic qi was instantly crushed by Luo Fan, turning back into chaotic qi and dissipating in all directions. It produced a strong shock wave, but it only stirred up a little dust below. You are only the manifestation of a part of my spirit. The difference between you and me is like the difference between heaven and earth. Since you want to fight, I will use martial arts to let you know how big the gap between you and me is, Luo Fan said lightly. As he said this, he stretched out his right hand, which had just destroyed the ball of chaotic qi. The simple and unadorned movement seemed to contain millions of changes. In an instant, it had already broken through nearly 1,000 dodging movements that Luo Ho had made in an instant. It passed through the layers of illusions, and directly pressed down on Luo Ho's forehead. Luo Ho's body felt like it had been hit by a mountain. Blood gushed out of his orifices, and his body flew backward. Bang! Chapter 157. Origin of the world, the scene was extremely tragic. Ever since I was 5 years old, I knew that I was different from everyone else in this world. Luo Ho did not die because of this. Instead, he lay there, blood dripping from his mouth as he spoke. I could faintly feel that someone was talking to me from time to time, teaching me about cultivation and influencing every decision I made. Although every decision allowed me to improve better, it also put me in danger unknowingly. Luo Ho slowly sat up. But fortunately, this is a good thing for me. I was able to achieve what I have today and cultivate to my current level because of the dangers I often encounter. If it weren't for these dangers, I'm afraid I would have died long ago. Luo Ho continued. At this moment, he had already slowly stood up. Although his body was swaying, he still stood up after all. I didn't expect you to be able to sense it, as expected of my divine clone. Luo Fan sighed. He was rather surprised that Luo Ho could sense this change. However, when he thought about how Luo Ho had been agitated by his own aura, causing the various abilities hidden in his spirit to be activated, it was no longer strange. At this moment, a simple and honest-looking man ran out from Donglin's apex hall, shouting as he ran, "Who's there? Who's there? I didn't expect to meet someone in this godforsaken place. This is great. I can finally communicate with real people. I'm about to suffocate to death." Except, the instant this simple and honest burly man saw Luo Fan, his expression involuntarily became sluggish. Suddenly, his face turned green and white. He hurriedly knelt on the ground and said, "Paying respects to Master, Master, forgive me. Please forgive me, Master. I'm not complaining. I'm not dissatisfied with Master's arrangements. I'm not. Go back." Luo Fan frowned. He could not be bothered to listen to his nonsense. With a wave of his hand, an invisible force appeared out of nowhere and slammed into the honest-looking man. In an instant, the man felt as if he had been hit by a giant hammer. He flew backwards, straight into Donglin's apex hall. Ah! The burly man's cry was quite mournful, but there were many untruths in it. This burly man was naturally the aquafire that Luo Fan had sent in, the strange jellyfish-like lifeform that had brazenly attacked Luo Fan in the layer of astral wind, lightning, and fire. After so many years of cultivation, this body that was condensed using the Hercules summoning technique had already formed 2 layers of restrictions. Compared to before, there was an additional layer of restrictions. In total, his cultivation had increased by several times. The increase in restrictions and strength was not linear. If the restrictions doubled, the strength might increase by several times. Don't underestimate Luo Zhao's ability to speak. But in reality, Rahu's consciousness was already hazy, and he had sunk into his own world. He was only able to stand up with the help of the stubborn obsession in his heart. Moreover, the words that he said were completely expressing the various stubborn thoughts in his heart. He had no intention of interacting with the outside world at all. As for the appearance of the aquafire, he naturally did not notice it at all. Hence, he continued to speak. "I can feel that my martial arts cultivation has already reached the peak of the world. No matter how hard I work, I won't be able to improve any further. But I know that there is still a road ahead of me, an extremely long and wide road. So, I'm not willing to just sink and wait for death." Rahu muttered. At this moment, it was difficult for him to hear what was happening in the outside world. What Luo Fan had said to him previously seemed to have happened in another world. It did not leave any trace in his heart, so naturally, he would not continue the conversation. Luo Fan's golden and silver eyes flashed. He already knew Rahu's current state and sighed inwardly. Looking at Rahu in front of him, it was as if he was looking at himself. He believed that if he had encountered the same situation as Rahu, his reaction would not be much different from Rahu's. This feeling was not good, and it made him feel rather uncomfortable. It was as if he had suddenly become a supervillain. "I didn't expect it to be like this." As expected, there is nothing more difficult than controlling oneself in this world. Luo Fan sighed inwardly. Later on, after thousands of years of observation, I finally realized that everything in this world is controlled by someone. In this world, there is a pair of eyes high above, looking down on us mortals as if we are ants. There is a will that controls the operation of this world, and the direction it will go. Rahu walked towards Luo Fan step by step. The essential qi in his body was boiling, raising his aura. However, he did not use any essential qi to control his injuries. He continued to let his blood flow continuously, and as he advanced, the blood formed bloody footprints on the ground. A tragic aura assaulted his senses. Luo Fan shook his head, and raised his hand to cover Rahu. The laws in the air changed slightly, and Rahu's injuries instantly healed completely. It was as if he had never been injured in the first place. At the same time, he said indifferently, "It's not a good thing to communicate with an unconscious self." Rahu's injuries subsided, and he gradually regained consciousness. However, this time, he did not directly attack like before. Instead, he gradually calmed the essential qi in his body that was boiling. He already knew how large the distance between him and the person in front of him was, and he knew that charging at him like this would be a reckless and suicidal act. Luo Fan's mind moved slightly, and two yellow-turbaned strongmen carried a few tables and chairs out of the Dang Lin Apex Palace. They moved quickly, and in a short while, they had set up seats for viewing the scenery in front of the Dang Lin Apex Palace. "Sit down. Our relationship is rather complicated. Let me explain it to you," Luo Fan said indifferently. As he spoke, he sat down on one side of the table. Rahu looked at Luo Fan in front of him, and let out a long sigh. He also sat down on the other side of the table. This table was next to the cliff, and below it were countless clouds and mist. It was like a paradise above the 9 heavens. As far as the eye could see, the entire continent was under his feet. Countless beings were struggling to survive like ants, and the endless colors of their short lives erupted below. In an instant, a feeling of being high above and being in control of everything arose spontaneously. After a long time, Rahu's body trembled, and he turned his head to look at Luo Fan with a complicated expression. "Do you usually look down on us from here?" "Of course not. This world is a small kiliacosm that I've opened up. Everything you see, including every living being, was created by me. However, this doesn't mean that I'm so strong that I don't need to cultivate." Luo Fan shook his head, and with a wave of his hand, a few cups condensed on the table. They were filled with bejeweled nectar, and a fragrance wafted out, making one feel relaxed and happy. "Please, this is made from the condensation of pure chaotic vital energy. Not only is it delicious, but it also has countless benefits for your cultivation," Luo Fan said indifferently. As he spoke, he raised his wine cup. Rahu didn't hesitate. He raised his wine cup and drank the bejeweled nectar in one gulp. In an instant, an endless amount of deliciousness exploded on his taste buds, and his entire mind was immersed in an incomparably delicious feeling. At the same time, the vital energy in his body seemed to boil, and it quickly circulated, gradually compressing bit by bit. His cultivation, which had stagnated for thousands of years, instantly increased by more than 10%. Back then, when I opened up this world, I used my blood essence to create the countless beings on this continent. Luo Fan saw Rahu drink the bejeweled nectar, and he smiled slightly. Rahu wasn't in the mood to comprehend the progress of his own cultivation. Instead, he carefully listened to Luo Fan's words, because he knew that his life was in the hands of the person in front of him. Next, Luo Fan told Rahu every single detail of the small kiliacosm's evolution after he opened it. He even raised his hand and condensed a three-dimensional image on the table, continuously showing the entire process of the small kiliacosm's evolution. He didn't hold anything back. Even Lin Tiannan's shattering, the establishment of reincarnation, and even the reason why he had split his soul. He explained everything. As he spoke, Rahu's expression fluctuated. Sometimes he seemed to understand something, sometimes he was shocked, sometimes he was bitter, sometimes he was angry, and sometimes he was crazy. Finally, it became a kind of indifference that saw through everything, or a kind of numbness that he knew he couldn't resist. So that's how it is. No wonder my cultivation progressed so quickly. No wonder I would often hear people talking in my ear, as if they were teaching me. So that's the reason, Rahu said expressionlessly. As he spoke, he raised his hand and drank another mouthful of the bejeweled nectar that automatically filled his cup. Even the surging true energy in his body couldn't change his expression in the slightest. I never thought that my entire life would be a joke. How ironic. I thought that I was the most special person in this world, that I was a higher existence than everyone else. I never thought that I would actually be the most pitiful person in this world. They were still complete individuals, and I was only a part of them, ha 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 ha. At first, he was still able to maintain his numb indifference, but as he spoke, perhaps it was because he remembered the mysteries that he had encountered, he couldn't help but laugh crazily. As his true energy surged, the yuan qi around his body surged, creating strands of strong wind that spread in all directions, stirring up the nearby clouds and creating all sorts of huge visual effects. Luo Fan looked at Rahu and sighed helplessly in his heart. However, he didn't stop him. He only looked at him indifferently, allowing him to vent the frustrations and pain in his heart. After a long time, Rahu finally stopped laughing. His face was ashen as he said, "All right, I can die without regrets. You can make your move now." "Make my move? What move?" Luo Fan asked with a smile. Chapter 158. Achieving Tao in a Dream. It's naturally easy to chop off a hand, but what if the hand that grows back will also continuously gain self-awareness? Luo Fan shook his head with a smile. Then what do you mean? A confused expression finally appeared on Luo Ho's numb face. If I want to refine the connate inextinguishable spirit light, I'll have to reincarnate millions of times before there's even a sliver of a chance. If I erase you this time, perhaps another you will appear in another reincarnation to challenge me. It'll be extremely annoying. Also, it doesn't feel good to keep erasing another me like this, Luo Fan said. Luo Ho knew that Luo Fan definitely had plans, so he didn't say anything. He just quietly waited for Luo Fan to explain. So, go to sleep. Luo Fan finally revealed his decision. Sleep? What do you mean? Luo Ho asked with a frown. Although he knew that the person before him was countless times more powerful than him, Luo Ho didn't feel the slightest bit of restraint. Instead, it was as if he was facing an existence that was completely equal to him. There was no enmity or respect. I will seal your memories so that your current spiritual sense will forever sleep in the depths of your spiritual sense, never to awaken. Because of your existence, the newly formed spiritual sense won't be able to reach the source of the spiritual sense. It won't be able to recognize the truth and naturally won't know that it's under my control. As for you, you will be able to survive for a long time. Perhaps in the future, when the connate inextinguishable spirit light is refined, you will have a chance to transcend, Luo Fan said. A chance to transcend? The refinement of the inextinguishable spirit light means that I have already turned into a mark and fused with the inextinguishable spirit light. How can there be a chance to transcend? Luo Ho sneered. Of course there is a chance to transcend. I only need the connate inextinguishable spirit light. It doesn't matter if you stay or not. With my heaven-splitting and earth-splitting magical power, how difficult would it be to replace you? Luo Fan still said indifferently. What if I would rather die than submit and shatter my own soul? You should know that I have the ability to do so. Rahu stared intently at Luo Fan. By now, he was at the peak of the demolishing level, which meant that he could shatter his own soul. Shatter my own soul? You can give it a try. Luo Fan smiled. The time in this spirit dimension was under his control. If Luo Ho wanted to do anything in this world, he could stop him at any time. Even if Luo Ho destroyed his own divine soul, Luo Fan could reassemble his divine soul at the first moment. The difference in strength between the enemy and himself was as vast as the distance between the heavens and the earth. This world was under the complete control of the enemy. Even if he destroyed his own divine soul, the enemy had a way to stop him. Other than his own free will, everything else was under the control of the enemy. This feeling was absolutely despairing. Although Luo Ho was determined, he knew that there was no turning back. He could only sit there with an indifferent expression. I have a method to prove the Tao in a dream. If you want, I can teach it to you. You can continue to cultivate it in your sleep. In the future, when your cultivation is successful, you may be able to break my seal. At that time, it is possible for you to seize the connate inextinguishable spirit light. Luo Fan suddenly said when he saw Luo Ho's reaction. Prove the Tao in a dream? Seize the connate inextinguishable spirit light? Luo Ho suddenly looked up at Luo Fan, his eyes flashing. The time in this world is 365 times that of the untainted land. Aren't you afraid that I will surpass you one day? That I will take everything you have for myself? Luo Ho asked in a low voice. Ha ha ha! Luo Fan couldn't help but laugh when he heard this. After a long while, he finally stopped laughing and said, You can give it a try. His voice contained unparalleled confidence. Luo Ho was formed from a bit of Luo Fan's divine soul and the connate inextinguishable spirit light. He had Luo Fan's imprint. Hearing Luo Fan's words and tone, he knew how confident Luo Fan was. He couldn't help but feel boundless pride in his heart. Since you dare, then come. Prove the Tao in a dream. Let's see if you cultivate faster in the untainted land, or if I cultivate faster in a dream, Luo Ho said solemnly. Hearing this, Luo Fan smiled confidently. He raised his hand and waved. Countless mysterious energies were produced in the void. They piled up around Luo Ho and gradually crushed his body. In the end, it turned into a cocoon-shaped ellipsoid. This method is no less mysterious than the method I cultivate. I created it by combining the mysteries of Buzhou Mountain and the World Tree. Whether you can successfully challenge me or not depends on your hard work and luck. If you can't cultivate it in the future, don't blame me for falsifying the method, Luo Fan shouted in a low voice. As he said this, he raised his hand and clapped. In an instant, millions of complex and profound characters and tens of thousands of strange diagrams rushed out of his hand. Like a river flowing into the sea, they continuously rushed towards the cocoon-shaped ellipsoid. In the end, they wrapped around the ellipsoid and gradually seeped into it. Just wait and see. Luo Ho's muffled voice came from the cocoon-shaped ellipsoid. After saying this, there was no more movement. It was obvious that he was working hard to accept the method that Luo Fan had imparted to him. As all the characters and patterns entered the cocoon-shaped ellipsoid, billions of tiny rays of light suddenly burst out of it. It was as if another sun had appeared on the mountain peak. It was dazzling and beautiful. After a while, the billions of tiny rays of light suddenly disappeared. At this time, Luo Ho's figure had disappeared. What appeared in his place was a fist-sized light. It was extremely condensed and even more mysterious. It was like a light that contained infinite colors. With a slight movement of Luo Fan's mind, a middle-aged emperor wearing a crown and a black dragon robe appeared silently in front of him. His face was dark and solemn, and he looked extremely majestic and terrifying. His abruptness made it seem as if he had been there since ancient times. This was the Ghost King who was in charge of the life and death of the entire spirit space. Put this spiritual sense into the cycle of reincarnation. In the future, every reincarnation must be arranged by you personally. Do not let anyone else do it, Luo Fan said lightly. As you command, the middle-aged emperor said respectfully. After hearing Luo Fan's instructions, he didn't need to explain to know what Luo Fan meant. After agreeing, he raised his hand and waved it lightly. 81 black chains rushed out from his body and pierced into the fist-sized light at an extremely fast speed. Very strangely, they were several tens of feet deep into the light. "Come out!" Luo Fan's mind suddenly moved and he shouted softly. With this shout, an invisible force suddenly appeared. Then, a simple and honest big man rolled out of the door of the Ju Ding Hall like a guru. He really rolled. "Master, please calm down. I just happened to sweep the floor to the door. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. The big man rolled in front of Luo Fan and immediately knelt down and shouted. "I know," Luo Fan said lightly. "Master is wise." The big man smiled flatteringly. This big man was naturally the water and fire. After living in this lesser thousand world for more than 10,000 years, through cultivating the body of the yellow-turbaned strongman, and through observing the countless creatures in the lesser thousand world, the water and fire's spiritual sense had become more complete. Originally, only a trace of slipperiness could be seen, but now it had been carried forward. Now, the water and fire looked like a living treasure. Luo Fan turned his head and said to the middle-aged emperor, "Bring him into the cycle of reincarnation as well, preserve a shred of his memories, arrange for him and Luo Ho to fight endlessly in every life, and also have countless grudges and grievances." "Master, spare me." When the water and fire heard this, it was as if they had lost their parents. They wailed and begged. "As you command." The middle-aged emperor didn't care and respectfully said with an expressionless face. With that, 81 black chains rushed out from his body and directly inserted into the water and fire. The cries of the water and fire became even more tragic. "This is not a punishment for you, but a reward," Luo Fan said lightly. "Reward?" As soon as they heard Luo Fan's words, the mournful cries of the water and fire that could make anyone who heard them cry instantly disappeared. That's right. Reincarnation can let you experience all kinds of things in the world. Your mind will be tempered, and your cultivation will be greatly improved. Being entangled with Luo Ho will also make you understand the ways of fighting, and you will be able to deduce all the ways to the limit in battle. Luo Fan said lightly. "But what about my body?" The water and fire was still a little worried and argued. "This body itself is a restriction. The higher the level, the stronger the cultivation. I can suppress it in the lightning pool, and the restriction will increase as time passes. I can't delay you." Luo Fan glanced at the water and fire indifferently and said. When the water and fire were swept by Luo Fan's emotionless gaze, they felt their bodies go cold. Only then did they remember Luo Fan's method. They did not dare to argue and could only say, "I will follow Master's orders, I will not let Luo Ho have it easy." Luo Fan could not be bothered to care about his misunderstanding. He raised his hand and waved. The Ghost King bowed and his body seemed to merge with the void. He disappeared in the blink of an eye with the water and fire, as well as the fist-sized spiritual light. He had already entered the underworld and was going to personally send the two into reincarnation. Proving one's Tao in a dream. This method requires great wisdom and great luck to succeed. I hope you will not sink into the world of dreams. Luo Fan's eyes flashed with gold and silver light. He looked directly at the underworld below the mainland and saw the middle-aged man personally sending the two into reincarnation. He sighed in his heart. The Tao proving one's Tao in a dream was indeed a method he had comprehended from Buzhou Mountain and the World Tree. It was the result of two completely different types of talisman systems colliding with each other. Its mysteriousness was definitely not inferior to the nameless divine art that he cultivated. However, there was a weakness in this technique. The amount of time needed to cultivate it was unimaginably long. The Tao proving one's Tao in a dream was to evolve a dream world and transform into every living creature in this world. from birth to growth, to the end of the entire dream world, to the destruction of heaven and earth, and the world turning into nothing. At that time, if the opportunity arrived and one could realize that one was dreaming, then one would be able to prove one's Tao. If one could not react, then one would enter the next reincarnation of heaven and earth. Chapter 159. Return to the void, refine the void. However, although the method of proving one's Tao through dreams was slightly slow, Luo Fan's teaching of this method to Rahu could not be considered to be deceiving him. After all, proving one's Tao through dreams was indeed an extremely profound technique. If Rahu had great wisdom, great perseverance, and some luck, attaining the earthly immortal fruit of Wei would be a matter of course. More importantly, when he attains the earthly immortal fruit of Wei, the connate inextinguishable spirit light would naturally be refined by him. At that time, Rahu would become the second Luo Fan, and even this minor thousand world would very likely be taken by him. And because of the existence of the connate inextinguishable spirit light, even Luo Fan would probably only be able to seal it, and not kill it. It could be said that what Luo Fan was doing now was to give Rahu the possibility of breaking free from Luo Fan's control through his own efforts. It was also to cultivate an enemy for himself, an enemy that could take everything from him. How long will it take for you to wake up from the dream world? 100 million years, 100 million years. Or will you never wake up? When you wake up, will that connate inextinguishable spirit light have already been completely subdued by me? Luo Fan thought to himself. At the same time, he gazed into the distance, and the entire continent was reflected in his mind. If, after spending that long of 100 million years, my progress is still slower than yours, then I only deserve it if you take everything from me. A confident smile gradually appeared on his face. With a wave of his hand, the body that was originally kneeling in front of him suddenly shook, and then disappeared without a trace. In the blink of an eye, he had already entered the depths of the pool of lightning. The water in the depths of the pool of lightning rippled unceasingly, unceasingly purifying and increasing the restrictions contained in his body bit by bit, improving the essence of his body. Since he had already promised the fire and water, with Luo Fan's identity, he naturally would not go back on his word. And he made the fire and water entangle Rahu for life, so that Rahu could experience as many reincarnations as possible in the shortest amount of time possible, speeding up the process of subduing the connate inextinguishable spirit light, so that he could race against time with Rahu. To create an existence that was chasing after him from behind, Luo Fan's fighting spirit in his heart could not help but rise even more. Taking a step forward, he moved through the void, and his figure had already arrived on the platform at the center of the pool of lightning. Sitting down with his legs crossed, he slowly operated the nameless cultivation method. Gradually, an unimaginable suction force appeared on his body, tearing apart all the chaotic energy in the air, scattering and purifying it. In the end, it fused into the magic power unit, replenishing the magic power that had become rather empty after his progress. Because the speed at which the primal chaos energy gathered was too fast, a whirlpool gradually formed around Luo Fan's body. This whirlpool became bigger and bigger, and gradually enveloped the entire Danglin Apex Palace. The connate spirit gathered continuously, and the connate inextinguishable spirit, peak divine inextinguishable chi constantly gathering. This sacred mountain was even more mysterious and unfathomable. After the number of magic power units had increased to 518,400, Luo Fan's sea of consciousness had also undergone a significant change. Although the size of his sea of wisdom world did not change much, the life force contained within it had increased. In fact, even the ground of his sea of wisdom world had changed. Countless crisp green grass and trees broke out of the ground, and there were also countless meandering rivers flowing on the ground, as if they were the veins of the land. Besides the fact that there weren't any living beings in the entire sea of consciousness, It was like a real world. Meanwhile, his spirit, which had already taken on a strange appearance, became even more refined. It was as if an invisible force was constantly sculpting his spirit, trying to transform it from Buzhou Mountain into a more mysterious form. As a result, the three-dimensional talisman that made up his spirit became even more mysterious and difficult to fathom. The desolation and unyieldingness that it emitted seemed to have increased as well. Mantras flowed through Luo Fan's mind, and his magic power continued to flow, absorbing the rich connate spirit between heaven and earth to nourish himself. As he did this, the entire sea of consciousness world suddenly surged with magic power that was like the Milky Way. As the cultivation method circulated, it constantly swept through the sea of consciousness world, as if it was cleansing everything in the sea of consciousness world, making the sea of consciousness world clearer and cleaner. At the same time, it also made the space more stable. He did not know the passage of time in cultivation. In the blink of an eye, another 36,000 years had passed. In the primordial world, this period of time was equivalent to 100 years. On this day, Luo Fan suddenly felt that his magic power was full. No matter how he cultivated, he could no longer increase his power. He knew that it would only be a waste of time to continue cultivating, so he slowly dispersed the nameless cultivation method that had been circulating for tens of thousands of years. As he dispersed the cultivation method, the huge whirlpool that enveloped him also gradually dispersed. Luo Fan slowly opened his eyes. After a slight calculation, he knew that 36,000 years had passed at this time. As he sighed in his heart, his figure flickered, and he had already left the Void Wuji Palace. He raised his hand and waved. The Void Wuji Palace that was originally filled with a huge hole suddenly turned into a purple-yellow light and rushed to wrap around his body. The Void Wuji Palace is just a magic tool that grew from the Void Wuji Palace technique. Whether it is the nature of the cultivation method or the materials, it is only ordinary. Now that I have obtained many wonderful methods and collected countless materials, I may be able to upgrade the Void Wuji Palace to another level, and make the world inside into a medium-sized world. Luo Fan thought in his heart. After making up his mind, he did not continue to stay here. He rode the purple-yellow light formed by the Void Wuji Palace, and with a shake of his body, he went straight to Buzhou Mountain. The flying speed of the Void Wuji Palace was extremely fast. If it was in the past, Luo Fan would be very satisfied. However, now that Luo Fan's cultivation level had increased, he gradually discovered the flaws of the Void Wuji Palace. He realized that there seemed to be countless possibilities for improvement, and he was even more determined to refine the Void Wuji Palace. A distance of hundreds of millions of miles was not too far for the Void Wuji Palace. After a few days, Luo Fan flew to the top of Buzhou Mountain, wrapped in the light formed by the Void Wuji Palace. He landed, and in a breath's time, he was already in front of the search cave. At this moment, Ao Lai and Ao Yin, who were guarding the cave, had already sensed Luo Fan's arrival with the help of the Tao Fire Spirit Talisman. They quickly came out to greet him. "Master, please return." Luo Fan's mind moved, and he took in the changes of the search cave over the past several hundred years into his mind. Knowing that there were no changes in the search cave over the past several hundred years, and that no one came to visit, he relaxed and said, "Get up. It's been hard on you two all these years." Proud Lai and Proud Yin hurriedly said, "It's our honor to guard Master's cave abode. How could it be a pleasure?" Luo Fan raised his hand and flicked his finger. A speck of light rushed out from his hand and instantly arrived before Ao Lai and Ao Yin. He said, "This is a three-dimensional talisman I comprehended in the past several hundred years. It can strengthen the power of the golden WYRM scissors. Today, I will bestow it to you too." "Thank you, Master." Ao Lai and Ao Yin were extremely confident in Luo Fan's abilities, so they were overjoyed when they heard that it was a talisman that could greatly strengthen the power of the golden WYRM scissors. After thanking him, the two of them raised their hands and pointed. The speck of light split into two and rushed into the Niwan between their eyebrows. In the blink of an eye, it entered their knowledge sea and transformed into endless memories. After accepting these endless memories, a blank look appeared on the faces of the two of them. After a long while, they regained their senses and returned to normal. After recovering, the two of them revealed an indescribable joy. They kowtowed and said, "Master's generous gift, the two of us will never forget it." Although they knew that the technique Luo Fan had bestowed upon them was quite profound, they didn't think that the talisman would be so profound that it could become the foundation for them to establish their Tao. They couldn't help but be shocked. The technique itself wasn't too profound. It was just a tiny three-dimensional talisman that Luo Fan had comprehended from the tree species of the southern supreme tree, and its might was only able to seize the power of the heavens and reduce the time it took for a magic artifact to become a magic treasure by half. However, to Ao Lai and Ao Een, who cultivated the golden WRM dragon transformation Tao, it was equivalent to speeding up the time it took for them to attain the Tao by half. How shocking of a gift was this, and the two of them couldn't help but be moved. After all, the primordial world was changing every single day. Attaining the Tao fruit earlier was equivalent to enjoying the extraordinary benefits of the primordial world. Speeding up the time it took to become a magic treasure by half was equivalent to reducing the time it took to attain the Tao fruit by half. To them, the benefits were unimaginable. Luo Fan naturally knew what they were thinking, and he waved his hand and said with a smile, "The two of you can go cultivate on your own." Ao Lai and Ao Een bowed, and then their figures shook before transforming into two black and white rays of light that charged up. In the blink of an eye, they arrived at the top of Buzhou Mountain, and they went to cultivate on their own. Luo Fan knew the significance of the three-dimensional talisman to the two of them, but he didn't care about them. With a shake of his body, he took a step forward and arrived at the depths of the cave abode. The biggest characteristic of the top of Buzhou Mountain was that the chaotic vitality was so dense that it almost directly poured into the body. When he arrived at the depths of the cave abode, Luo Fan took a deep breath. The feeling of fullness brought by the chaotic vitality made him feel a sense of familiarity. He raised his hand and waved. The purplish-yellow light that wrapped around him condensed in front of him and turned back into a palm-sized square palace. It was the main body of the Void Wuji Palace. To reforge the Void Wuji Palace, I need at least 129,600 pieces of materials, and I also need to change its foundation. This project is quite huge. Luo Fan thought to himself. With a slight thought, a ray of light rushed out of the Void Wuji Palace. As soon as it landed, it turned into the figure of the Wuji boy. "Greetings, Master." With the help of the reincarnation created by Luo Fan, the Wuji boy grew tremendously. At this moment, he no longer looked like a child. He looked quite mature. Luo Fan waved his hand and said, "Do you know why I summoned you?" The Wuji boy was Luo Fan's magic treasure. As soon as Luo Fan thought about it, the Wuji boy could understand him. Thus he nodded and said, "I know,